at multiple UK airports will continue their industrial action over pay, jobs and conditions. Driving examiners have begun a 5-day walkout affecting more than 70 testing centres in eastern England and the Midlands. Meanwhile, on the rail network, TSSA union members are on strike, causing disruption on the Great Western Railway and West Midlands trains. Well, travel correspondent for The Independent, Simon Calder, told GBNews the unions are losing public support.
We got this odd little message coming from the RMT union on Christmas Eve saying, where's the ministers? We want to talk to them. I think there is the sense that talking to individual railway men and women, those in the front line doing fantastic work, they're exhausted. They have lost hundreds, sometimes thousands of pounds. The idea is this is an essential industry. Trouble is, the travelling public is sort of saying, no, you're not.
Pope Francis has asked for prayers for his predecessor, former Pope Benedict, saying he's very sick. The Vatican says Pope Benedict had a sudden worsening of health in recent hours, but that his condition was under control and that he's receiving constant medical care. The 95-year-old former head of the Catholic Church became the first pope in 600 years to resign when he stepped down in 2013. Pope Francis, seen on the left here, made the surprise announcement at the end of his general audience.
I would like to ask all of you for a special prayer for Pope Emeritus Benedict, who, in silence, is sustaining the Church. Let us remember him. He is very sick, asking the Lord to console and sustain him in this witness of love for the Church until the end.
4 people have been injured in a suspected gas explosion at a house in Worcestershire. Emergency services were called to the incident in Evesham last night, shortly after 5 o'clock. 3 of the injured were taken to hospital and 10 neighbouring properties were evacuated. The northeast of England could be the latest region to have a directly elected mayor, as the government announces a £1.4 billion devolution deal. The arrangement would give powers over education, transport and housing to people across Northumberland, Newcastle and Sunderland. Elections for the new mayor would take place in May 2024 after a consultation process. Labour is warning families are losing millions of pounds due to unsolved crimes. The party says more than 1 million thefts went unsolved last year, with cases dropped because police failed to find a suspect. Labour's called the figures disgraceful. A Home Office spokesperson says the government's provided record investment in policing alongside the recruitment of 20,000 additional officers by March 2023. To the US now, and the death toll in and around the city of Buffalo has risen to 32 as the country is battling a deadly winter storm. Authorities in the New York state have been digging out from under 4 feet of snow after a record amount of snowfall there. At least 60 people have died as the monster storm has battered North America over the last week. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Of course, now, though, it's back to Mark.
Tamsin, thank you very much indeed. So the Army stepping in once more to cover for the striking Border Force staff at airports across the country and, of course, the Port of Newhaven as well for cross-channel ferries. But around 1,000 PCS union members have walked out until New Year's Eve. The union warning that the industrial action could continue for months if the government doesn't begin talks over pay. Well, during their last strike, some passengers observed that things were operating rather more smoothly than usual. But the unions accused members of the armed forces of waving passengers through, a claim that's been denied. Let's get the latest with Heathrow Airport, saying there aren't any currently issues there. What about the picture at Gatwick? Let's speak to our national reporter, Thea Chikomba, who's live there for us. And Thea, looking at the weather, one can't actually excuse people wanting to get away for a break abroad. But how do we know they're coping in the airport terminal itself with all the checks going on?
Yeah, so at Gatwick Airport, it's a similar picture to probably what's happening at Heathrow, as you've just mentioned. Heard a few minutes ago from Gatwick Airport themselves saying it's pretty smooth inside. They are saying the only people who may have some delays today are those people coming into the country and trying to get out of the airport. But the advice is, if you are planning to travel inside the airport today, and that's also across the rest of the country, is to take off glasses, hats and things and so on. So if you do need to go through e-gates, for example, it makes the process smoother as there's less staff working today. We've heard from the PCS union General Secretary Mark, who's basically saying the government haven't given a better deal in the last couple of months. It's been a long-running dispute. They've been offered a 2% pay rise, and they're saying that isn't in line with inflation, which is around 10%. We did hear, of course, from the Prime Minister. He's saying he's disappointed that these strikes are going ahead, but he is insisting that he's working to reduce inflation. But today, in terms of disruption, it's free-flowing today here at the airport.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, given to extra numbers, quite a lot of people trying to get through the airport. Certainly when I passed on the M23, big queues trying to get into the airport coming off the feeder road. So if they can cope with the extra numbers, it indicates perhaps that the impact, if you like, the industrial action, not what the PCS wanted.
Well, exactly, yeah. People are coming in. I did ask that question, is this having an impact on flights? Maybe flights having to wait for people to get in and out, but they are saying that is running smoothly as well. So perhaps not the anticipated disruption that we were expecting to see, but instead things are running, and perhaps the plans that they did put in place are working at the moment in time.
OK, Theo, thanks for updating us. We'll be back to see how that develops throughout the day, of course. Thank you very much indeed. Joining us now in the studio, political commentator and a former MEP, Belinda de Lucy. Belinda, thanks for being with us today. It's a key question, not just for the Border Force personnel, but for the rail workers as well, with the continued industrial action. Is it having the effect they want? Is it actually getting people round the negotiating table? Doesn't seem to be. So far, the government's sitting firm.
Yes, I think with the Border Force strikes, I think it's backfiring completely, actually, and exposing how much easier it is for people to get through immigration controls with the e-gates, for example, and also exposing perhaps how inefficient the staff have been if, when the military come in, there's so many comments about how much better it is with the military running it, the discipline, the efficiency. Perhaps we should be expecting more of our public sector's workers if they want the increases they are demanding.
Although the union is saying that, as far as they're aware, the proper checks perhaps aren't being carried out. It's not as rigorous as it would be if you had the proper personnel in place.
Well, I'm not sure about that, and I'm not sure how they have got evidence to back that up. The military, I think, will be doing an absolute stellar job and will be quite firm and tough with that. I know they don't have the same powers, but there are people there in the airport for the military to pass suspects on, if you like, onto. So they will be being dealt with. So the policing
process is still there if needs be.
Yes, I think it's been like turkeys voting for Christmas, the Border Force going on strike, and they haven't had the best optics over the past couple of years with threatening to go on strike when Priti Patel wanted to turn the dinghies back. And, I think they need to up their game a bit if they want to be paid.
However, it's got people talking about conditions of public sector workers and the fact that they all say, our real terms wages have fallen way behind, and that's why we have been pushed to this position.
And I understand that, but they're not unique in this. Everyone is going through this, and I feel like they've got so much more power than anyone working in the private sector who deserves a pay rise but just won't get it. And I do think maybe staggering it a bit and not being so cruel as to target people at Christmas. That's personal. People have taken that personally, and I think they have less empathy, certainly for Border Force, certainly for the railway workers, than they do with our nurses.
Grinch is the title, of course, the newspapers
exactly.
use. Indeed. Belinda, for the moment, thank you for that. But, of course, the industrial action hitting travellers perhaps all the way through into the new year or even beyond. The union saying it could go on for months if they don't get talks. And the airports affected Heathrow, Gatwick, Manchester, Birmingham, Glasgow, Cardiff, and, as we said, the port of Newhaven as well. And, of course, that next round of rail strikes coming up in January to add to winter travel woes. Well, let's speak now to Sean Tipton, who's ABTA, the Travel Association's Media Relations Manager. Thank you very much for joining us, Sean. It's the sort of perfect travel storm, really, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I mean, I've been in this job for a number of years now, and I haven't seen situations quite as bad as this for many, many years. Usually at this time of year, it's because of appalling weather that we have issues rather than large amounts of strikes. Because generally speaking, when you do get strikes in the travel industry, they are threatened, but then negotiations take place and they don't go ahead. But I think it's quite unusual that we are actually seeing these strikes going ahead now. Now, with Border Force, I think people due to travel over Christmas have been incredibly worried about these reports. And I know at one stage there were reports potentially of a third of flights being cancelled. That quickly was poo-pooed by the airline saying, no, they intended to run a full service. But I think the reason why it's not having quite such a big impact, quite apart from extra staff being brought in, military personnel included, it's because of the e-gates. When we didn't have e-gates, I remember we did have a Border Force strike quite some time ago before they're in place, and it was a really serious issue. But with e-gates in place, people can use those if you've got a British passport. The only exception to that is if your children are very young, 12 and under, in which case they do have to be physically checked. But that makes a massive difference. It really does, because you just don't need the level of staff there. And the other issue as well is this is about when you get back to the UK. It's not about departing the UK. So remember over the summer when we had all those people really worried about getting through security quickly and turning up really early? Well, this is a different matter. You might be standing in a longer queue when you return, but it's not going to make you miss your flight.
No, of course, because it is the check on coming back in. And just to update people who might be sort of preparing the family, there's no other way of getting around this issue with the kids. They've physically got to go through and get checked.
If they're over 12, then that's fine. But if they're under 12, no, and you're going to have to go with them. I think that's purely practical. They're not very big, are they, really? So it's just a simple matter of that, really. But apart from that, no, everybody else will be able to go through the e-gates as normal. And that also applies to, let's not forget, there are going to be lots of people who aren't UK citizens who come over to the UK, particularly for New Year. I think that's going to be an issue in a different sense because of the rail strikes. I'm hoping that's being publicised in other countries. So they tend to rely more on public transport than we do. Majority of people still go by car to the airport, but not if you're Spanish necessarily. So I'm a bit more worried about that. But they can actually use the e-gates themselves as well. But once they get through, if they found there are no trains there, that could be problematic. Try
the Gatwick Express. Good luck with that at the moment. However, let's just point to one other issue that's bubbling up on the horizon. That is, we understand the US is considering new COVID restrictions on arrivals from China because of unease about what's happening in China or lack of transparency. We're just reading Japan, Malaysia, Taiwan going the same way. Could we see this about to create yet more problems as the numbers increase in China?
I think you've seen those particular destinations are always a bit more wary than other countries in terms of COVID. They've introduced much more stringent restrictions and kept them for longer. So I think they're more worried. The general noises we get coming out of the British government is that they're very unlikely to reintroduce restrictions. It's not saying they would never do it, but it's pretty unlikely. So I think, cross fingers, most of us have been vaccinated now or have caught COVID, unfortunately. So I think we're in a very different position from where we were 3 years ago. But having said that, I can't speak for every country in the world, but some, they can all make their own minds up on this. And China in particular has always been very strict on this. And it looks like America is now taking a similar attitude towards China itself.
Yeah, well, we'll see what the US comes up with. As we say, that just coming up with us from the States. For the moment, Sean, thank you very much indeed for updating us with the position. Thank you. Now, let's move on to politics. The northeast of England could be the latest region to have a directly elected mayor because the Levelling Up Secretary, Michael Gove, has announced a new £1.4 billion devolution deal for the region, being called a significant step which would allow those in the northeast to have control over their skills, transport and housing plans. Well, Mr Gove said, I'm proud to have agreed a historic new devolution deal with the North East that gives local leaders more power, more money and an even greater say in how their areas are run. Well, is it a much-needed development of levelling up or just another layer of bureaucracy? Joining us, former Labour advisor and journalist Scarlett Maguire. Scarlett, thanks for your time. Just one reflection. I guess if they go ahead with this, with an elected mayor for the North East, they could well be Labour, couldn't they?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly likely they're going to be Labour. Look, I think devolution is a really good thing, and I think devolution gives gives power where it ought to be. But we're talking 3 years after they promised to start levelling up, that they've come up with this deal, that they've admitted that at the earliest it'll be May next year where they have the elections. And in the meantime, nothing has happened. I mean, that's what. And the other slight fly in the ointment, is that Dominic Cummings, the last time they tried to devolve in the Northeast, Dominic Cummings led the campaign against it and won. So I think this is just the beginning. And frankly, if I lived in the Northeast, I'd be saying, I want levelling up. I want good shops on my high street. I want a decent rail service. Devolution is all very well, but where is everything?
Yeah, and we haven't got much meat on the bone about where the money will be going. And I guess the fear is it just another level of bureaucracy, and it's the mayor's office and all the other paraphernalia that goes with it?
Well, certainly 38 million is going to be given to the mayor's office over 30 years. So they're taking for granted that it's going to cost at least $1 million a year to finance the mayor's office. But we know, and that's fine. It will need a lot of things. It's going to have to liaise with Whitehall. It's going to have to get the money in. But we're talking a very long way down the track when people in 2019 were promised levelling up, 40 new hospitals, all of this, and it's not happening.
And is it the fact that a mayor is fined for a metropolitan area, city, Manchester, Andy Burnham, of course, in charge there, it's more difficult for them to actually get a handle on a region as such?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. I mean, I think it's a good way of doing it. I mean, I think that we do need to devolve, and we need to running the Northeast and telling the Northeast what they want from London. And I think all of that's a good idea. It's the timetable that worries me. But also, I think for a lot of people, devolution, a mayor isn't the answer. They don't see it as the answer. I see it as a good beginning, but it's a good beginning after 3 years.
Yeah, and as you say, the time it then takes to put into action. Scarlett, thank you very much indeed. Great to talk to you, and we wish you a happy new year. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, let's get the views of Belinda, still with us here in the studio, former MEP and political commentator. Levelling up, they've kept pushing the agenda. It didn't happen, and Michael Gove's got a handle on it now. I mean, I guess that, this is the big sort of push to get devolution going. But as Scarlett was saying, when's it going to happen and what will there be at the end of it?
Well, this is a significant step, but we have obviously had lockdown and a pandemic. This hasn't freed up, I think, the resources, teams, money to be able to focus on this plan yet. And I think Michael Gove is doing a great job. He's even been highly endorsed by Andy Burnham, saying, at least Michael Gove will actually get it done. So I think he's highly respected in the job, even by Labour. It is essential. It was in the Tory manifesto. Millions of people voted for it. Localism is very popular. Many people in the UK feel poorly served by their politicians in Whitehall, and they need someone who lives and breathes the region to represent them.
Because, I mean, the North East does have a cohesive identity, doesn't it? That's the other
Very much so. I was born and bred Sheffield girl. Well, I mean, no, that's Yorkshire, but, it's very much... You feel... a bit further down, but you do feel a great connection to the culture and the people and the ways and the language up there. And I think it's great you get local representatives there to also sell the region internationally, to attract business and investors. Yeah. But the only concerns that I have is it was through the pandemic that highlighted the divisions that localism can cause with the different tiers over different postcodes and the different sort of lockdown rules there were in different areas under different mayors. It caused a lot of confusion. So I think, when crisis comes, maybe we should still look to Whitehall to do a unified
indeed.
policy.
And perhaps a bit politically naive in that, you may well get a Labour mayor then for a Tory government to really push this. Because Andy Burnham's been quite a thorn in the government side, of course.
Yes, this is giving a lot. This is giving a lot more power to the left, and I think we will see a lot more representation from the left in those areas, and they'll have more power. But then I'm a great believer in democracy, whether I agree with the result or not, if that's what people want. And
democracy in action.
Absolutely. Although I'd feel if you have the likes of Sadiq Khan, would we want to be seeing more of him and his obsession with masks and anti-car policies? in the north. I don't think that will work. So it depends on the quality of mayor and whether people are voting just so that a Tory doesn't get in, or whether a left-wing mayor is really the best for the region.
Belinda, thank you. And you're with us, of course, for the remainder of GB News Live to reflect on the issues popping up, because one of those is some sad news we're getting from the Vatican, which says that the former Pope Emeritus Benedict's health has suddenly worsened in recent hours. Well, current Pope Francis asking for prayers for his predecessor, saying that he is very sick. So we'll be getting the very latest on that for you. First, let's get an update on this weather as we head towards the new year.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back to GB News Live. Now let's reflect on that upsetting news from the Vatican, with Pope Francis asking for prayers for his the predecessor, the Pope Emeritus Benedict, saying that he is very sick. Vatican saying the former head of the Catholic Church health had suddenly worsened in the hours of this morning. The 95-year-old, of course, the first pope to resign in some 600 years, when he stepped down in 2013, saying he had neither the mental or physical health left to lead the church. These are the pictures we're getting from the Vatican at the moment. That's the live shot there. We understand that Pope Emeritus Benedict is being treated by medical staff in a former nunnery in the gardens of the Vatican, and that Pope Francis has been to visit him and then calling for these prayers. being told that his medical condition is under control, but clearly, given his age, he is ailing, and therefore the plea for prayers, and certainly the indication that the Vatican is preparing itself for perhaps his health deteriorating further, and indeed Pope Francis indicating his own medical problems. He's, of course, 86, where he's suffering with a condition with his knee, which means he's had to use a wheelchair on recent occasions, including the latest appearance in the Vatican. And we're being told that Pope Francis also indicating that he's made the decision to actually step down if he can no longer physically maintain his position, and has signed a document to that extent. So clearly a change in the sort of thinking in the Vatican, given the human frailty in this particular role. Belinda's still with us in the studio. And Belinda, you were just mentioning that your husband is a very staunch Catholic. Indeed, you've got family members there in the Vatican?
Well, his great uncle was a cardinal
right.
in the Vatican. My husband's very strongly Catholic. I'm Protestant, so you can imagine the fun debates we have around which church you go to and around the dinner table, but it's all in good faith. And I would say the way he feels about the Pope is very much how we feel about the Queen, the sort of head of the family, someone who's always there, and you feel like you're being taken care of. And
a constant presence.
A constant presence, and there is that connection and the touch. But I have to say, you know, what a great age. It is the age of that generation that, as like the Queen...
Yeah, you were drawing that parallel, which is something I hadn't thought about, that the passing of the generations. And, of course, the whole issue that Pope Benedict, as he was reflecting on his upbringing in Germany, the first German Pope for about 1,000 years, I think, and the fact that he was forced to join the Hitler Youth, and how he tried to atone for that then in the later years.
Yeah, and I think that was a great revelation of his, that he was so humble he could admit that, and his involvement in it, because that's quite a hard thing to talk about, whether you felt forced into it or not. But he did that, and atoning for harm that you have caused,
or your countrymen have caused,
or your countrymen have caused, you know, is a big thing to pass on to others, and you pay your blessings forward. And I think he is a great and much loved Pope. But it's always sad to see the end of an era of that sort of generation that was very resilient and taught us so much.
Although it was also a very divisive time when he came to Rome, because I mean he was previously for a cardinal as Joseph Ratzinger, but of course then when he was in office as Pope, we saw all these reports about alleged sexual abuse involving priests coming to the fore, and indications perhaps that the Church, the Roman Catholic Church, had not been robust enough in actually addressing those claims.
Yes, and I don't think they have, and I think it's important that investigations into the abuse of children by members of the Catholic Church are given as much exposure as we give any groomers or paedophiles or those that abuse children. No one should be protected by their religion, and I think it was right the Vatican came under criticism. But when you're living in a mini city, like the smallest country in the world, or city in the world, I think the Vatican City is.
It is, you're right.
It is the small. You live in a bubble, and as much as we like to criticise these sort of 1,000-year-old institutions, they will not keep up with the times as much as, you know, the rest of us do on the ground, which is why our monarchy is often coming under criticism now. And I think it's unrealistic to always think they will think like, you know, the Twitter mob in 2022.
Although I guess reflect that Pope Francis tried to address that by getting out into the world more, and this is one of the issues of Pope Benedict. He could not travel because he was becoming increasingly tired and frail because of his age, and that Pope Francis has also tried to address all the political issues. He's spoken recently about what's going on in Ukraine. It is still one of those voices of authority, and no greater authority, of course, than from above, talking about the political difficulties of the day.
Well, I find that quite worrying. I don't like great religious leaders getting involved in politics. I like the separation. And I think it's important to separate religion and politics. I think the Archbishop of Canterbury has come under quite a bit of criticism recently for getting involved in Brexit and the Rwanda policy. And of course, everyone has a right to their own opinion.
Yeah.
But I also think to preserve these great religions, involving yourself in politics too much is possibly the wrong way to go, actually.
Right. Well, we were just seeing there in St Peter's Square that not that many people gathering at the moment in Rome, in the Vatican City. But the latest that we're getting from the Pontiff, Pope Francis, is that this is what he asked of people. I would like to ask all of you to pray a special prayer for Pope Emeritus Benedict, to remember him because he is very ill, asking the Lord to console and support him. The Pontiff saying that at the Vatican. Francis making that appeal at the end of his weekly audience, giving no other details, although the Vatican then saying that indeed Pope Emeritus Benedict had experienced a sudden worsening of his condition. So we'll update you as we get more from Rome. Let's update you now, though, on the rest of the headlines. Here's Tamsin.
Mark, thank you very much. Here are the headlines from the GB newsroom at 12:32. 2 men have been arrested on suspicion of murder in connection with the stabbing of a 23-year-old man in a Birmingham nightclub. Semi-professional footballer Cody Fisher was stabbed to death on the dance floor of the Crane nightclub on Boxing Day. Hundreds of people were in the club at the time. His family say their hearts were broken following his death. West Midlands police say a 22-year-old was arrested in Birmingham city centre last night. A 21-year-old man was also arrested in London. Border Force staff and driving examiners are the latest to stage industrial action, with travel disruption also expected along the rail network as commuters return to work. Members of the PCS union representing Border Force staff at multiple UK airports will continue their industrial action over pay, jobs and conditions. Driving examiners have begun a 5-day strike affecting more than 70 testing centres in eastern England and the Midlands. Meanwhile, on the rail network, TSSA union members will walk out from midday, causing disruption on the Great Western Railway and West Midlands trains. Pope Francis has asked for prayers for his predecessor, former Pope Benedict, saying he's very sick. The 95-year-old former head of the Catholic Church became the first pope in 600 years to resign when he stepped down in 2013. Pope Francis, seen on the left here, made the surprise announcement at the end of his general audience. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GB News Live. Let's bring you some sad news with the death being announced of the satirist and comedian and actor John Bird at the age of 86, with many, including Rory Bremner, paying tribute to him. You may remember, of course, that he was with Rory Bremner and John Fortune in that Channel 4 satirical show, Bremner, Bird and Fortune. Rory Bremner saying, it's an irony that one of our greatest satirists, so brilliant at portraying ministers, civil servants or high-ranking officials, and who exuded self-satisfaction, was himself so modest and self-effacing. He was, to the end, never pleased with himself, always feeling he should have done better, been less lazy, had a late period like Brahms where everything was spare and abstract. Bird, of course, the same generation as Peter Cook and Eleanor Bron, one of those marvellous products of the Cambridge Footlights review. Pillars of the anti-establishment, as Rory Bremner described him. And, of course, John Fortune's also left us. One of the remainers of that generation has left the stage. His family saying that he had died peacefully at Pendine Care Home and that a family funeral will be followed by a celebration of his life and his career in the new year. So remembering John Bird, another sad loss to the world of entertainment. Now, we're in reflective mood, of course, between Christmas and New Year. The festive season overindulgence is the phrase I'm seeing on my autocue here. Holiday foods while relaxing with your nearest and dearest. On average, we're being told individuals, and here's the hard bit, put on approximately 1.35% of their entire body weight over this Christmas period, he said, breathing in. So it's unsurprising that the most popular resolution for the new year, yes, is to live healthier. Well, joining us in the studio to share their tips, dietitian and nutritionist Dr. Sarah Schenker, and also wellness expert Monica Linford. Thank you both for joining us. And I guess that is the issue, of course, that always the new year resolution is to lose weight and get fit and so on. Although, isn't it actually part of the human cycle that we put on a bit of weight in winter?
Oh, very interesting that you know that. Yes, indeed.
Well, I had noticed, just
in Eastern
even the desk has got a bit further out,
yes,
or something's happened.
Well, it doesn't give us permission to overindulge, but Eastern philosophy says that, yes, in winter, naturally, you put on a couple of pounds, up to 4 pounds, and in the summer you shed it because you're naturally more active.
Yeah, but and it insulates the body.
It does indeed.
Stores
yes, it does.
For sort of getting through the winter period.
And you want, I'm delving into now Eastern philosophy and Eastern medicine a little bit. I won't go off piece for too long. But the kidney energy, your kidneys are the generators of your vitality. And the purpose of laying on that little bit of extra weight around the middle is to actually protect your kidneys.
Really?
Yes, and boost them.
We're always told it's that spare tyre around the middle is the warning sign.
Well, that could also be the liver laying down a little bit of fat.
Right, OK.
But yes, a bit of both.
It's about keeping it under control.
Yes,
so
in perspective.
A little bit of insulation, a little bit of protection, but not so much that you look like you've...
Yeah, but that's the other problem, is this sedentary of on the couch watching the sort of Christmas movies and the rest of it and not moving about, I guess.
Yeah, and
that's
while you're not moving as well. So while you're watching, your hands are free to picking up the chocolates, and that's the only bit of movement that you're doing,
right?
Which is not good.
Okay,
So,
a lot of people do Boxing Day walks now, though.
But Boxing Day, walks and park runs, and all sorts of events and swims and all that type of thing, which is really good. But the thing to say to yourself is, once Christmas is over, it's over, and then you start to focus on your new goals for 2023.
Right.
So make them smart goals and make
Okay,
them...
well, I was just going to ask, what should those goals be then? I've got my pen and paper in hand here.
Whatever they are, they need to be specific. So don't just say, I'm going to eat more healthily, and then what does that actually mean? Say, I am going to cook from scratch 3 times a week, and I'm going to do that for the next 6 weeks to see how it goes. Or I'm going to add more vegetables to my shop. I'm going to get one of those, boxes delivered, and I'm going to use it. Have something specific, and that way you're more likely to achieve it.
Is that a bit of a luxury, given so many people, the cost of living crisis? They're just looking at trying to get as cheap food as possible.
Yes.
Quite often that's processed stuff.
It's processed, but, it's a false economy, isn't it? Because processed foods, relatively, they can be cheap, but then, they're not as cheap as maybe going out and cooking from scratch. Once you've got those basic ingredients in your cupboard, then you can start to build.
And what does Eastern philosophy tell us about making this decision, conscious decision for the year ahead?
Well, it's about movement, Mark, not just about exercise and getting fit. It's about movement, and they see it as a movement as nutrition. So the movement in their philosophy is stimulates the peristalsis of your internal organs. So your organs are...
like Tai Chi and all that sort of thing?
Qigong, yoga.
Yeah.
And even I like the East meets West approach. So the Pilates is a wonderful way to start. If you haven't exercised for ages, you want a slow build into strength. Start with something like Pilates and yoga and walking. Because walking stimulates circulation, and it also, in Eastern philosophy, massages the heart. The vibration of walking is really good for the heart.
From the soles of your feet
From
upwards?
the bounce of the feet on the ground is very, very therapeutic for the heart.
Right, so walking the dog I can put down as exercise?
Go for miles.
Well,
yes.
I'm not sure about that. But
if nothing else, walking is probably the best thing you can do for yourself. Yeah.
Brilliant. Have you been taking notes of that? I see you've got your notebook out as well.
I was just about to ask, do you burn calories if you're cold? Because we could combine, lowering your heating with actually... burning calories. So is it true?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
So if you go out without an extra layer, I mean, as long as you don't want to risk your health, but that keeping yourself warm burns more calories if you're fit enough to do, fit and healthy enough to do that.
Yeah, it's your thermogenesis. It's called.
Are there things that we shouldn't be doing? I mean, obviously, it's great to have a list of things that we should be doing. But,
Sitting.
Really? Like we're doing at the moment?
Sitting and snacking.
Yes,
sitting and snacking. The 2 worst things you can do.
Yeah.
And they've still got those 2 mince pies on the desk to tempt us.
We can slowly slide those away.
Right, OK.
We were just talking before, it's so important to get back to more of a 3 meals, not just continual grazing, snacking.
Oh, really? Because I thought there was a school of thought that actually eating little and often was actually better for you rather than having big pile-ups.
It would depend what you're eating, but most people don't eat the good stuff in between their meals. And actually, the way that we eat today is so damaging because we eat mindlessly. We eat on the run, we don't really enjoy our food, we don't stop to think about what we're having.
So this is the slow food movement where people, actually stop and take stock and chew their food
properly. Such an important part of what we need is nutrition, that we should put more effort into thinking about what we're having.
And eating mindfully, eating mindfully, not mindlessly.
Yeah, mindless eating between meals is so damaging because all you're doing is continually asking your body to produce more insulin, more insulin, more insulin.
The sugar rush and things.
Yeah, the more insulin you've got, it's impossible to lose weight.
And that's why so many people develop diabetes later in their lives. Right, OK. The problem is, of course, this all begs the question of, do you have time in the modern life to be able to do all these things properly? Because most of us are on the rush, aren't they?
Yes, and in the mornings, when the kids are hungry for breakfast, I've got four yapping mouths. What's for breakfast, Mum? And I'm like, OK, what's really quick?
Cereal.
Cocoa Pops or whatever.
Yeah.
But actually, I've started to give them things like rice and noodles for breakfast.
Really?
Yes, because they're very quick. They're hot water over a bit of rice noodles, soy sauce and some raw peas, and they actually love it. They love having savoury now for breakfast over sweet.
How interesting.
And that helps keep them quiet for a little while. to lunch.
Because
worth getting some, investing time in new habits, because once these habits form, then they are easy again. So
Right,
it's the first
okay.
couple of weeks, it's just the difficult part.
Right, now comes the difficult part, OK? Your New Year resolution.
I would like to immerse myself much more in mindfulness exercise, Tai Chi, Qigong. I do it anyway.
Well, meditation, just thinking about things?
I meditate daily, so I
Really?
do
My
mindfulness.
son does this, you see, and
yes,
I just think he's
I have
zoned
for
out.
30 years,
Wow.
and it does make a huge difference. It just helps you get a little bit of objectivity in life. So
OK.
Mindfulness,
Right.
I would say.
That's good enough.
Mine is to not look at my phone first thing in the morning, to keep it in a drawer and to walk around the block.
Oh, what a good
So
one.
my first experience of life every day is fresh air and getting my body going rather than being in bed and checking the phone for half an hour first. I think that's a good change the speed up of my day.
It's a bit of a sort of millstone around the neck, isn't it, or a phone around the neck. And yours?
Mine is to be nicer to my husband and my kids.
I think we'll leave it there.
I've got to do it.
Right. And mine is to listen to the producer when they say we're out of time, we've got to move on. So thank you very much indeed, and we wish you Happy New Year.
Thank you very much.
And a mindful New Year, indeed, of course. Plenty for you to think about there at home from Sarah and Monica. Now, the 8th of September, you remember 2022, the day that we'll remember in history, with Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II dying peacefully at Balmoral Castle, her family home in Scotland. Our royal correspondent Cameron Walker looks back on that day and, of course, the momentous events that followed.
The news that everyone was dreading happened. Buckingham Palace has announced that the Queen has died peacefully at Balmoral.
A day that is now etched in history.
Queen Elizabeth II was the rock on which modern Britain was built. Our country has grown and flourished under her reign. Britain is the great country it is today because of her.
Thousands gathered at royal residences to lay flowers and Paddington bears. A nod to Her late Majesty's surprise sketch at her Platinum Jubilee. Immediately, Charles ascended the throne and was formally proclaimed king at the Accession Council in St James's Palace. Politicians, past and present, united in grief despite their party differences.
He'd lost his mother on the Thursday. Here he was on the Saturday morning, standing in front of all of his Privy Councillors. They're his Privy Councillors now.
The king paid tributes to his beloved mother and renewed her pledge of lifelong service.
Hi everyone, thank you so much.
An olive branch from Prince William to his brother Prince Harry, when the siblings reunited to greet the public with their wives and view flowers outside Windsor. Any reconciling was short-lived. The Queen's coffin, accompanied by her daughter Princess Anne, was driven to St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh to lie at rest. An opportunity for the people of Scotland to pay their last respects to the Queen of the United Kingdom. An RAF C-17 flew Her late Majesty back to London. The state hearse, specially designed for the public to see inside, drove down crowd-lined streets before one final night in Buckingham Palace. A well-rehearsed ceremonial procession brought the Queen to Westminster Hall so the public could pay their last respects as Her late Majesty lay in state.
People would queue for hours on end. They'd finally get in, and it would be 5 seconds, 6 seconds, and it just happened so beautifully and so peacefully.
The state gun carriage of the Royal Navy, pulled by 142 Royal Naval ratings, took Queen Elizabeth II's coffin to Westminster Abbey for the state funeral. At the King's request, the wreath on top of the coffin contained flowers from the gardens of Buckingham Palace, Clarence House and Highgrove. The royal family's dignity and stoicism shone through in the face of unimaginable grief. Princess Charlotte's choice of brooch, in the shape of a horseshoe, was gifted by her great-grandmother, the Queen. She, alongside her future king brother George, processed behind the coffin with their parents, the Prince and Princess of Wales. A state hearse to Windsor Castle for the committal service. More than 800 people, including the Queen's personal staff, filled St George's Chapel, in stark contrast to Prince Philip's funeral, where just 30 people could attend because of COVID restrictions. The imperial state crown, the orb and the sceptre were removed from the coffin and placed on the high altar. The King then placed the Queen's camp colour of the Grenadier Guards on the coffin. The wand broken, creating the symmetry with the 3 instruments of state being removed, ready to be passed on to their successor. The Queen was buried with her late husband, Prince Philip, in a private service in the King George VI Memorial Chapel. Back together for eternity. Cameron Walker, GB News.
And Cameron's with us live in the studio now. Quite extraordinary seeing those pictures again. I mean, in one way, it seems so long ago. And then when you see the faces and the family coping with their grief and the fact that, you know, the Queen has gone, which we still find quite difficult when we try and sing God Save the King, doesn't seem quite right. It was really a momentous change that happened in September.
It certainly was, only 3 months ago, but I think the fact that, you know, King Charles III still seems very much natural to us now is because it was such a smooth transition following the death of Her Majesty the Queen. Of course, everything was planned years in advance, getting Her Majesty's coffin down to London, the lying in state, people queuing for hours to see Her Majesty pay their final respects. Of course, the Accession Council with King Charles as well in St James's Palace. It was all this tradition which just played out so beautifully to the point now where we're looking ahead to King Charles's coronation.
And perhaps we hadn't realised quite how ill Her Majesty had been. We'd seen the photo when Liz Truss went up to Balmoral with all the politics still carrying on, but obviously behind the scenes there was a recognition that she really was failing, wasn't she?
Yes, I mean, from the Palace's perspective, all we had was that she had what they described as episodic mobility issues, basically good days and bad days with her movement. You're right, we saw those photographs of her appointing Liz Truss as Prime Minister. She looked very frail, but she was smiling. She clearly was very much still with it. So I think that's why it was such a shock 2 days later when she was no longer with us, of course. Her mother lived till she was 101, another indication perhaps that we thought she would have a couple of years left at least.
A centenary to celebrate. Now, Belinda, you were telling me you've got 3 children, as you said, and they're of an age that they could recognise the significance that was going on. But you camped out on the Mall, not very far from this gentleman at the end of the Mall, talking about all the people camping out there. Yeah.
Well, for the procession or the queues to the Queen's coffin when she was lying in state, I took my eldest daughter and may have made an excuse to the school that wasn't particularly true.
I thought you were going to say an excuse to actually jump the queue.
No,
no
queue jumper here. We started way back near Tower Hill and it took all night. But it was a wonderful thing. I wanted my girls to know how important it was to show respects to someone who was so selfless and showed so much duty and service. Because I do worry sometimes with quite a self-indulgent, not self-indulgent, not narcissistic either, self-obsessed generation that perhaps that wonderful generation of constant selfless duty to one and all, with not wanting any thanks above all else, needs to be recognised and thanked. So I dragged my girls along and they loved it. And then only in as much as it gave them a time to feel part of something very historic, but to also say thank you. So when she sort of bowed towards the coffin, you know, she had tears in her eyes, and I was so touched.
And how old is she?
She's nearly 18.
Right.
And my other 3 I took to the procession up the Mall. So we camped out the night before and we found a spot where I noticed them. I thought they were military guys because they were all sort of lying in a very straight way with their sort of hats on, behind their head, and I thought, we'll be safe next to them. So we camped out with chairs and sleeping bags, and the procession was utterly breathtaking.
Yeah, and again, the children...
I wanted them to know that the least they could do to pay their respects was be a bit cold for a few hours and, you know, have numb toes, and it was a way of saying thank you to the Queen.
And will you be going to the coronation?
Yes, and I'm very pleased to hear that I think Charles is planning the big coronation that we all hoped he would, rather than a downsized.
How big are we believing it will be? Because we've talked about the slimmed-down monarchy, cost of living crisis, questions about would the Golden State coach be used and so on. What sort of feed-through are we getting on what we'll see?
Well, from my understanding, it's not going to be a cost-cut coronation, but what it is going to be is perhaps slightly shorter than that of Queen Elizabeth in 1953. Hers went on for roughly 3 hours, which was clearly quite a long time.
And televised.
The first being, you know, televised to a mass audience at least. King Charles's the stuff that was in Queen Elizabeth II's coronation, some of which perhaps is seen as outdated now. So that's the sort of elements which are going to be taken out. But the core traditional elements of a coronation, the crowning, the anointing, all of that is still very much going to remain.
The holy oil and so on, yes.
The holy oil, the military procession that we have become so familiar with over the last year, that is also going to be there.
Rehearsed to the nth degree, I guess.
Exactly. And from guidance from government as well, they very much want it to be a celebration of global Britain, because clearly the royals have a power of soft diplomacy on the world stage, and that's something they really want to strengthen with this coronation in May.
Yeah, especially with a certain book coming out in the new year, but we won't mention that for the moment. Cameron, thank you for that. Belinda, too, thank you with your reflections, of course, of that historic event. We're talking about the military personnel coming up, the Border Force staff now at the airports with the strikes. We'll be getting the latest from Gatwick Airport. Stay with us.
But shall we still use the AirPods because they are quite good?
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
It's 1 o'clock and welcome to GB News Live with me, Mark Longhurst. Coming up for you this hour, around 600 Armed Forces personnel deployed once more at Britain's airports to cover for striking Border Force officers. 4 days of industrial action this time to affect airports across the UK, as well as the port of Newhaven, being one of the busiest travel times of the year. There's been a boost to the retail sector in Northern Ireland over the Christmas holidays. Some good news at last for the economy, but it seems customers are spending less as the cost of living crisis bites. We'll get the full picture from Belfast for you. And 1 in 4 elderly Britons fear they'll have to resort to DIY dentistry due to the lack of NHS appointments. The British Dental Association warning that more than 47 appointments have been lost in England alone since the lockdown in 2020. All that to come. First, the latest news headlines with Tamsin.
Mark, thank you very much, and good afternoon from the GB newsroom. It's 1 minute past 1. 2 men have been arrested on suspicion of murder in connection with the stabbing of a 23-year-old man in a Birmingham nightclub. Semi-professional footballer Cody Fisher was stabbed to death on the dance floor of the Crane nightclub on Boxing Day. Hundreds of people were in the club at the time. His family say their hearts were broken. West Midlands police say a 22-year-old was arrested in Birmingham city centre last night. A 21-year-old man was also arrested in London. Border Force staff and driving examiners are the latest to stage industrial action, with travel disruption also expected along the rail network as commuters return to work today. Members of the PCS union representing Border Force staff at multiple UK airports will continue their industrial action over pay, jobs and conditions. Driving examiners have begun a 5-day walkout affecting more than 70 testing centres in eastern England and the Midlands. Meanwhile, on the rail network, TSSA union members are on strike, causing disruption on the Great Western Railway and West Midlands trains. Travel correspondent for The Independent, Simon Calder, told GB News the unions are losing public support.
Oh, we got this odd little message coming from the RMT union on Christmas Eve saying, where's the ministers? We want to talk to them. I think there is the sense that talking to individual railway men and women, those in the front line doing fantastic work, they're exhausted. They have lost hundreds, sometimes thousands of pounds. The idea is this is an essential industry. Trouble is, the travelling public is sort of saying, no, you're not.
Pope Francis has asked for prayers for his predecessor, former Pope Benedict, saying he's very sick. The Vatican says Pope Benedict had a sudden worsening of his health in recent hours, but that his condition was under control and that he's receiving constant medical care. The 95-year-old former head of the Catholic Church became the first pope in 600 years to resign when he stepped down in 2013. Pope Francis, seen here on the left, made the surprise announcement at the end of his general audience.
I would like to ask all of you for a special prayer for Pope Emeritus Benedict, who, in silence, is sustaining the Church. Let us remember him. He is very sick, asking the Lord to console and sustain him in this witness of love for the Church until the end.
The government says it's urgently seeking information following reports that a number of UK-Iranian dual nationals have been detained in Iran. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard says it's arrested 7 individuals with direct links to the UK due to their alleged involvement in anti-government protests. A Number 10 spokesperson has rejected claims the UK is inciting riots within the country and called on Iran to stop holding foreign nationals for diplomatic leverage. The northeast of England could be the latest region to have a directly elected mayor as the government announces a £1.4 billion devolution deal. The arrangement would give powers over education, transport and housing to people across Northumberland, Newcastle and Sunderland. Elections for the new mayor would take place in May 2024 after a consultation process. Labour is warning families are losing millions of pounds due to unsolved crimes. The party says more than 1 million thefts went unsolved last year, with cases dropped because police failed to find a suspect. Labour's called the figures disgraceful. A Home Office spokesperson says the government's provided record investment in policing alongside the recruitment of 20,000 additional officers by March 2023. To the US now, the death toll in and around the city of Buffalo has risen to 32 as the country is battling a deadly winter storm. Authorities in the New York state have been digging out from under 4 feet of snow after a record amount of snowfall there. At least 60 people have died as the monster storm has battered North America over the last week. This is GB News. More news from me in half an hour. Now, back to Mark.
Tamsin, thank you very much indeed. We'll update you about the situation with the Border Force in a moment, but let's just bring you some breaking news we're getting from Downing Street, where the Number 10 spokesman says that he wants to see, or Downing Street wants to see, the unions hold further talks with employers to reach a fair agreement and end strike action. So the spokesman went on to tell reporters, as we said before, what we can't do is to allow for double-digit pay rises that will embed inflation, which will impact the amount of money people have going forward. But then asked particularly if any deal is close on the rail unions and bosses. Daily Mail had been reporting that the RMT particularly was softening its stance. The spokesman went on to say, it's for employers and the unions to do the detailed negotiations, but it is our position remaining. We want to see the strikes come to an end. We've seen the disruption they've caused not just this week and next week, but throughout the Christmas period. We believe a fair and reasonable offer was put forward, which the RMT rejected. But now we want to see the unions get back round the table with the employers and reach a fair agreement. So speaking in particular about the rail stoppages, but of course we have got the Army stepping in once more to cover for the striking Border Force staff at airports across the country, and also the port of Newhaven with its cross-channel ferry. Around 1,000 PCS union members walking out until New Year's Eve, with the union also warning that industrial action could continue for months if the government does not start talks over pay. Some passengers, though, observing that things were operating more smoothly than usual in the last stoppage. The union, however, accusing the armed forces of just waving passengers through. That's a claim that's been denied by the Army. Let's get the latest now with our national reporter, Thea Chikomba, who's down for us at Gatwick. Thea, what's the sort of feedback you're getting from what's going on inside the airport terminal there?
Yes, the feedback we're getting from those who work inside, they're saying things are running smoothly, but they are giving advice to people who are coming here to the airport that they should bring some food, water, and also just to look after themselves if they do come across queues inside. But they are saying largely things are running smoothly, so perhaps not what we anticipated, seeing lots of delays inside. You did mention there that the government are saying, a spokesperson from Number 10, saying they don't want to see double-digit pay rises, for example, at the moment because of what's happening economically. The PCS union have said they want to see a 10% pay rise, and at the moment what they've been offered is a 2% pay rise, which they say simply isn't enough at the moment in terms of what's happening with the cost of living crisis in the country. Now, around 1,000 members of the PCS union are walking out today, and they will be until New Year's Eve. So it's said to be another few days where we see perhaps military personnel, sailors and others, civil servants have also joined them inside there just to make things smooth. We heard also from the PCS union criticising the government, saying they're just putting a plaster on what's a problem which has been happening for a while now, because they want better conditions, pay as well, which we have been hearing from them over the last few weeks.
Yeah, indeed, as with many other public services. But the proof seems to be in the pudding that, of course, this is one of the busiest periods for travel, and yet we're not getting indications of flight delays in terms of the aircraft coming in or going out.
That's right, it is a busy period, perhaps people coming back from their Christmas holidays or leaving if they still have that time to have leave over the next few weeks. We've been here since the early hours of this morning. Flights have been coming in and out regularly, so that doesn't seem to be affecting them. We have heard from Gatwick themselves, they're saying flights are running smoothly today, but the advice for passengers coming in is to just make sure they're prepared just in case if there are any delays. But we do know there are e-gates, so that is making things a little smoother inside the airport.
We can hear one of those planes coming in right on cue with the top of you. So, Theo, for the moment, thank you very much indeed for that, because you probably won't hear any more questions for the moment. Thank you very much for updating us. More from you later. But let's get the views now. Joining us in the studio once more, Belinda de Lucy, who's political commentator, former MEP. And Belinda, we're just sort of updating people with this breaking news we're getting from Number 10, with this spokesman speaking more specifically about the rail issues. Clearly, a bit of a softening, perhaps, because we had them both sides very entrenched before Christmas, didn't we?
Yes, I do think the RMT have pushed it a bit. I think they've pushed the public a bit too far and maybe are cottoning onto it a little bit, that they're losing sympathy and empathy. You know, they have chosen a very a personal period for people that deprives them of seeing their loved ones. And it's these constant use of the public as a political football by both sides. But really the unions have put us on a leash and held us to ransom. And I think attacking our time with our families as a way of getting attention from the government hasn't been accepted by everyone as an okay method. And so I think they're slightly backtracking now and seeing actually maybe we do need to get round the table again, because we can't have the status quo. So something has to happen. Something's got to give, as that film says.
The difficulty seems to be when the union leaders, Mick Lynch particularly, have talked, it's not necessarily just about the pay. It's about the modernisation. And certainly in the RMT terms, it's about having, for instance, driver-only trains, no guards on the trains. I travel on Thameslink, that's driver-only, it works okay. But of course, the union's position is what happens in an emergency? And there may be quite a few travellers thinking, actually, maybe the union's got a point on this.
I do feel concerned that there won't be guards on the train. You know, I've got teenage daughters and I don't want to pull the, you know, as a woman card, but I do think we're a little bit more vulnerable sometimes on public transport, on our own, late at night, if there are drunk groups of guys. Sometimes you feel a little nervous and it's nice.
Or if it's a medical emergency.
Or if it's a medical emergency for anyone, or you know, if a young boy feels attacked or bullied, it's nice to have someone on the train. So I'm with them on that. But in terms of pay, I mean, they get paid a lot, the drivers. They get paid more than our nurses.
Yeah, although obviously what people are pointing out is that the ASLEF drivers may do quite well in the cab, but a lot of RMT staff elsewhere are not necessarily on great pay. And of course, the issue being a lot of these unions saying, well, you know, we've tried to do our best for quite a few years, but in real terms, our wages have fallen way behind.
And they have fallen behind at a time where year after year ticket prices have risen. So they're seeing much more money coming in to the railway system.
Do you travel by train yourself?
Well, I failed my driving test and I've never actually,
you know, passed. Because we're all looking at 6.9% paying increase in ticket prices at least.
I use trains all the time, but I have a family and friends rail card that you sign up to if you've got kids, and it gives you a good 30% off. But I'm a public transport pro, you know, I rely on that, but so many people rely on it for their job, to see relatives, you know, to go to the doctors if they have special conditions. So I do think this needs to be worked out, but double digits is crazy at a time like this. They should have never put it so high.
Anyway, a signal perhaps that we're seeing a movement, particularly from the government. We'll see what the union reaction is to that. But let's talk about more industrial strife, discontent amongst junior doctors, fueling fears they may now go on strike, of course, after last week's industrial action by the nurses and paramedics and ambulance drivers. Now, a recent survey showing that 2/3 of junior medics have, quote, actively researched leaving their jobs from the NHS in the past 12 months as they prepare to ballot on the strike action. That coming from the British Medical Association. Its survey of 3,819 junior doctors across England in November and December, revealing 79% had often thought about leaving the NHS. Well, joining us now to discuss the issue is GP Dr. Anita Raja. Anita, thank you for your time joining us once more. And of course, the impact is, in terms of the junior doctors disappearing, not just on the hospitals, because many feed through eventually to become GPs.
Certainly, and we must understand that the term junior doesn't really explain what these doctors do, because anybody who is below a consultant level could be a junior doctor with vast experience. Anyone who's been working as a registrar, a senior registrar for over 10 years could be a junior doctor just because they have not completed their training yet. We're seeing some very, very disappointing and dire figures. And you and I, all of us know why this is happening. Junior doctors have worked relentlessly throughout the pandemic. They've put their lives at risk, significant sacrifices we've seen many doctors and many nurses die during the pandemic, pre-vaccine rollout. And of course, there's an enormous contribution from their part. But unfortunately, when we look at the pay, the real term pay cut has been more than 26% since 2008-2009. And I am not joking. I'm not just saying this. There are foundation year doctors who can't afford their rent. They can't afford heating their houses. They can't afford buying food towards the end of the month. So there is a huge crisis here.
Yeah, indeed. And I think there's a hospital trust up in Newcastle that's organised food banks and help for its medical staff and effectively a soup kitchen to keep staff fed. But I'm just looking at sort of drilling down into the research a bit more that the BMA has done. It's not necessary that they want to leave the profession. I mean, many are talking about going abroad and going to New Zealand and Australia, so continuing in their jobs, but with better conditions and a better rate of pay.
I mean, we've got to understand that when a doctor becomes a doctor, there is approximately 100,000 debt on them. They've put their whole youth into studying. These are highly qualified professionals, very educated members of the society, the cream of our society. Of course, they have the right to move to better, brighter lands where they are appreciated and where they can have a better quality of life. It's very difficult for a doctor to qualify as a doctor and then say, we're going to quit and move on to a new profession. So yes, if you look at the BMS survey again in a bit more detail, a third of the doctors are actually thinking of leaving in the next 12 months if they get the opportunity to leave. And I personally know so many doctors and nurses who, as we speak now, are actually working in Australia and New Zealand. Better pay, better weather, more appreciation, and definitely not the risk of burning out.
Yeah, and is it the part of the whole sort of concoction of unease that people are not just looking at their pay package, they are burnt out and they just want basically the system to treat them better?
It's not just about money, it never is. But we do understand that money is important if you have to feed yourself and you have to keep the house warm.
Exactly,
But it is about having a better environment, more appreciation. I mean, if we look at most of these doctors, there's a lot of criticism at A&E waiting times. There's a lot of criticism at not being able to access your general practitioner. But people don't realize that your doctor does want to see you and it's not in their hand. They are the front man for all the abuse, unfortunately, because all our managers are nicely tucked away, taking away hundreds of thousands of pounds a year, making these rules, mismanaging the NHS, and then the doctors get the blame. I mean, throughout Christmas period, my husband was actually working in A&E, and the stories he was telling me, I mean, the sort of abuse people were getting because they had to wait, because of the waiting times. It's not your doctor's fault. Your doctor's trying ever so hard. Your doctor's probably doing the work, the job of 10 doctors. Your nurses are also doing the same. There's a huge problem in retention, and we certainly need to do something now. We need to act swiftly.
And that's systemic reform, perhaps you're talking about, not just a pay deal, as we've discussed. Anita, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for joining us, and we wish you and your husband a happy and a healthy new year. Thank you very much indeed. Well, coming up here on GB News Live, the retail industry in Northern Ireland seeing an increase in footfall over the holiday period, although the cost of living crisis meaning that customers are spending less. But what does it tell us about the economy? GB News Northern Ireland reporter Doogie Beattie updating us live from Belfast. But hopefully now the weather is waiting for us.
Hello there, welcome to your weather update. I'm Claire Nazir. Here are your headlines. Windy today with coastal gales as rain pushes northwards. The risk of hill snow later across Scotland and some showers to follow. Your bigger picture, low pressure firmly in charge. Now the ice warning across Scotland eases through the morning, but this rain warning across southern parts of Wales as well as the West Country extends through the afternoon. It's wet outside through this lunchtime. You can see the rain slowly moving towards the central belt of Scotland where it will be heavy. Rain also for Northern Ireland, covering much of the Midlands, northern England. Drier further north with some cloud further south and southwest. We'll see some brighter skies emerge, but also some showers. And those winds will be relentless, but delivering some milder conditions to the south of that weather front. Now overnight, the rain continues its passage northwards, returning towards the west as we head through the evening and overnight, and more showers gather across northern England, Wales and the West Country. Some clearer skies further east, but still a few showers here. Now it's going to be a windy night, keeping temperatures up away from the far north, where it will be a chilly start to the day on Thursday, even with a little sunshine, but rain never too far away. Now through Thursday, we watch as showers continue to track in on that strong wind across England and Wales. We'll see some wet weather for Northern Ireland around lunchtime, as well as western Scotland, and that again will ease as it eases towards the east. So some wet weather across many areas, but sunshine and showers for England and Wales. Some of these showers will be on the heavy side and temperatures are notched down on today.
Now, through the evening and overnight, we watch as another batch of rain arrives across Ireland. Some clearer skies ahead of it. Temperatures will take a tumble, but it does mean a bright start to the day come Friday morning across these parts. Generally speaking, as we head through the next few days, the last few days of 2022, it remains unsettled, but some dry weather through New Year's Eve and into New Year's Day across some parts.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Welcome back to GB News Live. Let's bring you the latest snapshot on the state of the economy, particularly in Northern Ireland. Now, the retail industry there has seen an increase in what they call footfall. That's people actually going out and shopping over the holiday period. But the cost of living crisis meaning customers are spending less. In addition, as a result of that Northern Ireland protocol, importing goods becoming more expensive from the retailers, many of whom have been trying to buy in bulk to reduce the cost of tracking and documenting tariffs on each order. Well, let's speak now to our Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie, who's joining us in Belfast. So, Dougie, I mean, they're obviously doing the sums that great that people are out and about and wanting to spend, but it's actually how much they're spending and then, therefore, how much business makes in profit.
Correct, totally correct. And of course, they are 40% up, for 40% from last year. And let's not forget, that's still 30% down on pre-pandemic levels because we haven't got back there yet. I'm actually standing at one of the major junctions in East Belfast that takes you into Belfast city centre. And it's not that busy to say that there's sales coming down there. I mean, if this was the centre of London and you're quite literally about a mile out of the city centre, this would be pretty packed right now, and of course it's not. There is problems, of course, with cost of living, but the main problems for Northern Ireland's retail are coming down the line this year. Some of them you explained there in your introduction, but I suppose the main ones is that footfall turning to money, and how do you bring people back into the city centre? That's a problem the whole way across the UK, and earlier on today I caught up with a man that knows all about that, the CEO of Retail NI, Glyn Roberts.
Well, I think first and foremost, it's about creating a new vision for our town city centres, making them fun destinations that people want to come and bring their families time and time again. We're going to face significant challenges in the first 3 to 4 months of 2023. We're worried about significant rate rises, and this all comes when English independent retailers are getting a 75% reduction in their rates. But independent retailers in Northern Ireland aren't getting a single penny. In fact, may actually see an increase in the rates from the regional rate and the local rate as well.
Well, you can hear from Glyn, the rates are a big problem. And back about 20 years ago when I was a cub, to use a local expression, we used to sit in the council chambers reporting on radio as to how the rate rises were going, because don't forget those rate rises are done in two parts, the regional rate and the domestic rate. And with the public sector looking for bigger pay rises, of course those councils will be looking to up those rates in order to pay their staff more to avoid industrial action, and that could then have a knock-on effect of businesses going out of business, which means then the rate collection then goes down. So there's a very, very thin line there. You also mentioned the protocol. That is causing huge problems in Northern Ireland, mainly with those cheques that are coming in. It's not so much the cheques, it's the paperwork that goes with them. So to avoid multiple paperwork, multiple amounts of payment, most of the businesses here are buying in bulk, and with interest rates going up, that means that your stock is then, if you're having to borrow the money, is costing you money on your money as it sits there.
Yeah.
So Northern Ireland in 2023 could be in for a little bit of a rough ride in the retail sector.
Dougie, thanks for updating us there in Belfast, and fond memories of being a cub reporter in a council chamber, and of course all those courts as well. Remember it well, practising that shorthand. More from Northern Ireland, of course, as we get it. More from you coming in. Plenty of views with Francis reflecting on this industrial action we were reporting on. He says, or she maybe, with our military forces helping out with travel chaos, maybe the government should be training our military forces to cover for everything to do with running our country, as they can truly be trusted. Plus, I think anyone who's served in the military should be guaranteed a home. Good point. Graham, meanwhile, when will the union members demand their leaders are sacked if they live in the past? Imagine they had leaders who understood where we are, how things have changed and how to make things work in the future. Keep those views coming. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Coming up too, DIY dentistry because of NHS dentist shortages. Will you be getting the pliers out? Well, that looks as if it's going to be painful anyway, whatever he's about to do. That's all coming up next after a news update. Ouch, with Tamsin.
Mark, thank you. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom at 1:29. 2 men have been arrested on suspicion of murder in connection with the stabbing of a 23-year-old man in a Birmingham nightclub. Semi-professional footballer Cody Fisher was stabbed to death on the dance floor of the Crane nightclub on Boxing Day. Hundreds of people were in the club at the time. West Midlands police say a 22-year-old was arrested in Birmingham city centre last night. A 21-year-old man was also arrested in London. Border Force staff and driving examiners are the latest to stage industrial action, with travel disruption also on the rail network as commuters return to work. Members of the PCS union representing Border Force staff at multiple UK airports will continue their industrial action over pay, jobs and conditions. Driving examiners have begun a 5-day strike, affecting more than 70 testing centres in eastern England and the Midlands. Meanwhile, on the rail network, TSSA union members are striking, causing disruption on the Great Western Railway and West Midlands trains. Pope Francis has asked for prayers for his predecessor, former Pope Benedict, saying he's very sick. The 95-year-old former head of the Catholic Church became the first pope in 600 years to resign when he stepped down in 2013. Pope Francis, seen on the left here, made the surprise announcement at the end of his general audience, but didn't give any further details. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
And welcome back to GB News Live. Now, grit your teeth, literally, because more than a quarter of pensioners say they fear they'll have to carry out their own dental work, including, yes, extracting teeth, because of NHS dental shortages. That's the latest research finding. 41% of Britons saying they would be willing to undertake DIY dentistry if they needed any treatment due to a lack of NHS appointments. Now, according to the British Dental Association, more than 47 million appointments have been lost since lockdown in England alone. Younger and middle-aged people, most inclined to take matters into their own hands, we're being told. Almost half of those aged 18 to 34, and then 46% of those 35 to 54 saying, yes, they would try to resolve problems themselves. Ouch. Well, joining us now to discuss the issue, dental surgeon, award-winning dental surgeon indeed, Nilesh Palmer. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. And I guess your advice would be, first of all, please don't do this at home.
Yes, I mean, hearing those shocking statistics, the first thing I would say is please don't attempt DIY dentistry, such as taking out your own teeth at home. It can lead to really, really serious complications. So please, please, please don't do it.
I guess there are things that you can get temporary cement, can't you, at chemists if you had a crown or a cap come off, and you can sort of stick that back as a temporary fix. But people seem to be talking about, doing some pretty major work themselves.
Yeah, now we're getting, the temporary crown and the cement material is fantastic if you can't get to a dentist straight away. But now we've got people talking about busting out the pliers and removing their own teeth. So they're stepping it up a level, which is definitely not something we want to see as a profession.
And what's gone wrong? Is it that so many dental surgeries have gone private, they're not doing NHS work any longer? Or is it there's just so much demand for NHS treatment?
It's almost a perfect storm. We've got fewer dentists being trained. The younger dentists who qualify don't want to work in the NHS. They're not happy with the contract which dentists have, which they don't feel encourages good quality treatment or remunerates dentists in a way which they find satisfactory. Plus, 14% of all NHS dentists are now approaching retirement. So we're losing dentists at the top of the career and at the bottom of their career as well.
Right. And I guess the other issue is there was such a backlog of appointments and treatments with lockdown because, of course, we were being told at that time, don't go to the dentist because quite clearly of the risk from COVID.
Correct. We were shut for 3 months. So for 3 months, there was no dentistry happening in the entire country. As you mentioned previously, patients actually became very good at using the temporary crown and filling material. But because no dentistry was happening, we had such a huge backlog of cases to get through. But remember, many dentists decided to retire and not come back to work either. So we lost lots of clinicians who are very dedicated to the health service. And unfortunately, we just don't have enough dentists, and the real-time funding for dentistry hasn't really gone up as it's gone up in other areas of healthcare. So finding an NHS dentist who can do the treatment in a time frame which is acceptable is very difficult now.
So, again, is this the government needing to address the superstructure, if you like, of how the treatment is provided across the country?
Correct. You've got it spot on. So we've had an NHS dental contract, which many dentists, including the British Dental Association, have said it's not really fit for purpose anymore. And instead of bringing about complete change or a complete overhaul, we've just had little tweaks to the contracts over the years, which hasn't really helped the underlying problem, which is too many people need dentistry. There's not enough dentists to carry out that dentistry. So how do we solve that issue?
And of course, as you pointed out, it's not just having your teeth looking nice and being able to smile and being shiny and so on. It's the regular check for oral cancer and all those other things that go with the regular treatment.
Correct. Remember that heart conditions, oral cancer, there's so many things where we can see in the mouth before it can be detected elsewhere. And if COVID has taught us anything, is that your overall general health is so important in how you fight bacterial or viral contaminations. So oral health needs to be at the top of the agenda, and the government just needs to overhaul the entire NHS dental system to make it workable for the population and for the infrastructure that we have.
Nilesh, thank you very much indeed, and we hope that obviously things do improve, especially for us older generation, before we, as you say, resort to the pliers. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you.
Let's speak once more to Belinda, still with us here in the studio, joining us as political commentator, former MEP, and with some very nice teeth.
Oh, thank you very much.
You're smiling. So you haven't resorted to the pliers quite clearly.
No, I haven't done the string around the tooth attached to the door handle and
which we remember as kids, of course, was a bit of a joke, but people literally used to do it.
Oh, I did it when I was
Really?
young. Yeah, I definitely tried that. My dad did the door pulling and out it came, but it had to be wobbly first, and of course it was only baby teeth.
Yeah, and you used to get the tooth fairy in those days. They used to bring you 2 and 6pence, half a crown in my days.
Yes, that's true. No, those. But I think it's great if the public learn to do at home in a safe way anything they can to improve their health, to take the burden off the NHS, as long as it's safe. So there are many things you can sort of Google and find out how you can improve your gum health, and only use the dentist when you really need it. And also book, when you leave the dentist, make sure you've got another appointment in your diary for 6 months' time, so you keep that regular.
But it does seem extraordinary, doesn't it, in the 21st century, when we're trying to talk about the health of our children, school lunches and so on, that we haven't got a health provision for dentistry, which is not a luxury,
No.
as we're hearing. It can pick up a lot of health conditions, and of course, early intervention, like all medical things, means that you're going to keep your teeth for longer.
And we pay for it. This is something we have earned a right to.
National insurance.
National insurance. When you're in your 60s, like goodness knows how many years and how much money you've paid to make sure that you have that service. So you deserve it and you're entitled to it. But we have to stop depending on so much outsourcing our labour to outside of the UK and start really appealing to our domestic workforce instead of stripping poorer countries constantly of their doctors and dentists, because that also keeps working conditions low in the UK.
Yeah, because I mean that's a good point actually. That I think many people their experience is that a lot of the dentists available have come in from abroad.
Yes, well, a third of UK doctors now are overseas. I don't know what it is in dentistry, but I can imagine it's the same, if not more. And although they're incredibly welcome and we're very grateful, it's not right to keep depending on that rather than appealing to our doctors and nurses and dentists born here, offering them a good salary, good working conditions, so that we keep our domestic workforce involved in our NHS.
And as we're hearing from Neil, actually getting people into that system.
Yes, and keeping them there.
Yeah. Anyway, keep on smiling, says the man whose crown has fallen out and is looking for some temporary cement. However, let's reflect on international news now, actually, because the situation in Ukraine is worsening once more. Civilians have been leaving the city of Kherson after days of intense shelling by Russian forces there. In the past 24 hours, they fired at least 33 rockets at civilian targets in the city. That's according to Ukraine's military, with fighting reportedly intensifying, Russia deploying more tanks and armoured vehicles, and reported that hundreds have left the area since strikes on Christmas Day. Lines of cars forming at checkpoints leading out of Kherson, and others leaving by train as well. Well, joining us now to discuss the latest picture, Con Coughlin, defence editor and chief foreign affairs columnist at The Telegraph. Con, thanks very much for joining us. Good to talk to you once more. This is a situation where we remember the Russians were on the other bank of the Dnipro River, where they've obviously managed to sort of dig in and prepare. And it's this approach once again of just firing at civilian targets.
Yeah, well, I think one of the terrifying things of the Russian way of war is their indiscriminate use of their military might. Here in the West, we take great care, or we're supposed to take great care to avoid civilian casualties. It's just not in the Russian military doctrine. And what's going on in Kherson and elsewhere in Ukraine is basically an attempt by the Russian military to terrorize the Ukrainian population into submission. And in the run-up to Christmas, there's been a lot of talk in Europe and in America about the possibility of peace talks, of some kind of negotiations. And this is basically the Russians sort of saying, if you don't get to the peace table, this is what you're going to get.
Kuleba, the Ukrainian foreign minister, as you say, was indicating that they'd try and get some UN talks going in February. But they did add that for that to take place, Russia would have to own up to war crimes, which clearly it sees all these civilian attacks as coming under that umbrella.
Well, and I agree with them. And I think Russia has committed a lot of war crimes from day one. If you remember the original offensive on Kyiv back in February, and the massacres that took place in the town of Bucha, which is just outside Kyiv. Right the way through, we've seen war crimes committed. We've seen torture chambers recovered by the liberating troops. We've found mass graves, etc. So this is a serious issue, and nobody, I think, in their right mind is prepared to let Putin and his thugs off the hook for this. So that is a big issue if you're even looking at sitting down at peace talks. And of course, while we're discussing whether there should be a peace process, the Russians are committing more war crimes, as we're seeing in Kherson with this indiscriminate shelling of civilian neighborhoods.
Now, what does this tell us? Because I think the latest estimate is that 400 people left yesterday alone. A hospital maternity ward shelled on Tuesday, being shelled 60, 70, 80 times a day, according to people there. We were being told by some of the military experts that Russia was running out of munitions and particularly shells.
Yes. Well, I mean, I think first of all, the military experts are right. Russia's military strength is greatly depleted. The Russian military's ability to mount the kind of offensives we saw earlier in the year is now virtually non-existent. So they have to resort to these sort of old-fashioned tactics of just using artillery shells and things like that, and missiles. I think the quality of the missiles and shells they have are limited, but still, the Russian military, I think at the start of this conflict, was something like 10 times the size of the Ukrainian military. So they've got resources, and they can carry on causing trouble. And it doesn't take, with a mortar, you can cause a lot of trouble for your adversary.
Yes.
So
we're just seeing some pictures as we speak to you. As we speak to you, Con, we've just been seeing some pictures that have come through, the latest scenes in Kherson, which are pretty graphic of the damage on the civilian areas. And I guess this is part of it, that this old-fashioned weaponry is indiscriminate, that it just fires into an area, and you've got things like incendiary devices as well. It's not exactly surgical warfare.
No, and as I said, if the British Army resorted to these tactics, those responsible would be court-martialed. I mean, this is just not acceptable under the laws of warfare. But as we've seen since Putin came to power, his first war was in Grozny, in Chechnya. And what do? They leveled Grozny, and they killed a lot of civilians. And this is Putin's way of doing it. And as we've seen over the Christmas holiday, anybody who opposes him is likely to fall out of a hotel window. The latest oligarch died in India over Christmas.
Yeah, I was going to say, even if they get away from Russia and get to India. Yeah. Well, what do you make of the latest state of play within the Kremlin and what's happening with Putin? We still get these suggestions that he is gravely ill, that perhaps there are people moving against him, but he's still there in power.
He is, and like a lot of dictators, he's over the years, he's worked very hard to consolidate his position. He's surrounded by yes men. The defense minister, Shoigu, has been with him for nearly 2 decades, and is a Putin loyalist. Gerasimov, the head of the military, again has been with Putin for many years, and these people have been promoted because they've demonstrated their loyalty to Putin. So, of course, there's talk about a palace coup, and there's talk of Putin not making his normal Christmas time appearances for his press conference and things like this. But and we've had lots of Western intelligence reports that he's ill, but he goes on. He seems to be preparing to maintain hostilities in Ukraine well into the new year. So as there's a lot of wishful thinking that he's ill, he might disappear, but the reality is he's preparing for more bloodshed in the new year.
Yeah. So last thought quickly then, Con. I mean, the likelihood, the possibility of talks perhaps at the UN or elsewhere in the new year?
I think there will be talks, but whether they get anywhere, I think the omens are very poor, not least because the Ukrainians quite rightly say they're not going to do any kind of deal with Russia until they've vacated all the territory, including Crimea, that they've annexed since 2014. And that's a big ask.
Yeah, and Putin unlikely to accede to that, of course. Con, thank you very much indeed for joining us with your thoughts. And and a Happy New Year to Happy New Year, hopefully, for all those people in Ukraine as well. Thanks very much indeed. Well, Belinda's still with us here in the studio, and we're just saying, pretty graphic scenes. We're seeing those latest pictures we're just getting in from Kherson, and this is the whole issue about this war. A lot of it's being waged by Russia, at least, on civilians.
Well, I think the indiscriminate nature of the attacks completely contradicts Putin's reasoning for the war, his excuse for the war. I want to protect the Russians. I want
from the Nazis.
I want to denazify parts of Ukraine. Well, if you're shooting indiscriminately, I mean, he had a maternity ward was attacked, and luckily no one was injured. But Putin didn't know that, but they went for a maternity ward, and not only does that put women in a state of fear. So the pregnant women in the region or in the local area, we're terrified now of having their babies.
Yeah.
This is about terrifying the local populations, and whatever you believe about the Ukraine-Russia war, because people have fed so many stories. It's a proxy war, Zelensky's a bad guy, Putin's a bad guy, they're just different versions of bad. You know, we don't know really what to believe because we're fed so many different lines. The fact is, Russia invaded Ukraine. It decided to kill Ukrainian citizens, and is
still doing
and is still doing so. And those are the facts. And so we must continuously have the Ukrainians in our thoughts and prayers.
And looking at the West's approach, I mean, it's actually strengthened, some would say, particularly, of course, Germany, which has changed its position now on this. And we saw Boris Johnson leading the way. Sunak has indicated that, you know, the arming will continue, the money will continue. And then, of course, Washington saying Patriot defence systems and so on. But will this resolve hold as it drags on?
So it's been 10 months, and I feel like if talks aren't happening now, I mean, Russia can keep this up for years if they like and hold Europe in a grip, in a state of fear. But I think as soon as Europe starts weaning itself off more and more from Russian gas, that will weaken Putin's position, and he won't be able to hold us to ransom so much. But I think he's obviously losing support on the edges, but really Putin is staying a very popular man in Russia.
A lot of nationalists still support.
A lot of nationalists. Boris is convinced that Putin won't resort to nuclear weapons. He thinks that will resign Russia completely out of the civilized nations club for life and reduce, you know, the economy into a sort of a coma in Russia. So I don't think there's a real fear of nuclear weapons being used en masse.
Yeah.
But I do think it's going to be a very long and very expensive war. The question is, how much are we prepared to keep paying for it?
Yeah, and of course, Putin, as Con was saying, has done this before with Chechnya and certainly in Afghanistan with the war of attrition, as it was.
Yeah.
But anyway, we shall see what emerges in any talks. But as we were saying, certainly the latest we're getting from Kherson is that we've got hundreds of people leaving with some pretty intensive shelling going on, as we're seeing there, yet more people dying as a result of that. So more as we get that coming in. You've been sending yet more views in on the issues of the day. We were updating on the devolution that Michael Gove was outlining for the North East. David's reacted to that by saying, in Bristol, we got fooled by Cameron into voting for a mayor, but recently we finally got another vote to get rid of it. It's total bureaucratic nonsense and a waste of money. Colin, meanwhile, this was rejected a few years ago as it will not benefit Northumberland or Sunderland, but will just give Newcastle a boost. This is another layer of bureaucracy and yet another increase to council tax, but councils that love putting up tax. Bernard, then, the mayoral way is not the way to go. One person should not have the power to decide what an area wants. Look at London, a total disaster. Indeed, a lot of motorists actually critical of what Sadiq Khan has done or trying to do for the various measures of ultra-low emission zones and so on. Keep those views coming as ever. GBViews or GBnews at gbviews.uk. Coming up in this next hour, we've got the latest on industrial action at our airports. Members of the armed forces once more covering for the striking border force. I nearly said farce, across the country. Our GB News national reporter live from Gatwick Airport with the very latest. Back after this break and a look at the weather for you.
Hello there, welcome to your weather update. I'm Claire Nazir. Here are your headlines. Windy today with coastal gales as rain pushes northwards. The risk of hill snow later across Scotland and some showers to follow. Your bigger picture, low pressure firmly in charge. Now, the ice warning across Scotland eases through the morning, but this rain warning across southern parts of Wales as well as the West Country extends through the afternoon. It's wet outside through this lunchtime. You can see the rain slowly moving towards the central belt of Scotland where it will be heavy. Rain also for Northern Ireland, covering much of the Midlands, northern England. Drier further north with some cloud further south and southwest. We'll see some brighter skies emerge, but also some showers. And those winds will be relentless, but delivering some milder conditions to the south of that weather front. Now, overnight, the rain continues its passage northwards, returning towards the west as we head through the evening and overnight, and more showers gather across northern England, Wales and the West Country. Some clearer skies further east, but still a few showers here. Now, it's going to be a windy night, keeping temperatures up away from the far north, where it will be a chilly start to the day on Thursday, even with a little sunshine, but rain never too far away. Now, through Thursday, we watch as showers continue to track in on that strong wind across England and Wales. We'll see some wet weather for Northern Ireland around lunchtime, as well as Western Scotland, and that again will ease as it eases towards the east. So some wet weather across many areas, but sunshine and showers for England and Wales. Some of these showers will be on the heavy side, and temperatures are notched down on today. Now, through the evening and overnight, we watch as another batch of rain arrives across Ireland. Some clearer skies ahead of it. Temperatures will take a tumble, but it does mean a bright start to the day come Friday morning across these parts. Generally speaking, as we head through the next few days, the last few days of 2022, it remains unsettled, but some dry weather through New Year's Eve and into New Year's Day across some parts.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
We We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back here to GB News, and coming up this hour for you, around 600 Armed Forces personnel back at Britain's airports today, covering for those striking Border Force officials. The resumption of industrial action affecting airports across the country, as well as the port of Newhaven. In the other headlines coming up, counter-extremism reforms delayed due to a clash, we're told, between Michael Gove and Suella Braverman. We'll be looking at that in more detail. Who'll come out on top? The long-awaited overhaul of the government programme set back as the Home Secretary and Levelling Up Minister disagreeing over the way the review is being presented. And of course, it's the year that we lost Her Majesty the Queen. Our royal correspondent Cameron Walker reflecting on the momentous events of September and then the nation mourning her loss. But right now, let's get an update on the news headlines with Tamsin.
Mark, thank you very much, and good afternoon from the GB newsroom. It's 1 minute past 2. 2 men have been arrested on suspicion of murder in connection with the stabbing of a 23-year-old man in a Birmingham nightclub. Semi-professional footballer Cody Fisher was stabbed to death on the dance floor of the Crane nightclub on Boxing Day. Hundreds of people were in the club at the time. His family say their hearts were broken following his death. West Midlands police say a 22-year-old man was arrested in Birmingham city centre last night. A 21-year-old man was also arrested in London. Border Force staff and driving examiners are the latest to stage industrial action, with travel disruption also along the rail network as commuters return to work today. Members of the PCS union, representing Border Force staff at multiple UK airports, will continue their industrial action over pay, jobs and conditions. Driving examiners have begun a 5-day walkout, affecting more than 70 testing centres in eastern England and the Midlands. Meanwhile, on the rail network, TSSA union members are on strike, causing disruption on the Great Western Railway and West Midlands trains. Downing Street has urged unions and employers to hold further talks in a bid to reach an agreement and end strike action. Travel correspondent for The Independent, Simon Calder, told GB News the unions are losing public support.
Well, we got this odd little message coming from the RMT union on Christmas Eve saying, where's the ministers? We want to talk to them. I think there is the sense that talking to individual railway men and women, those in the front line doing fantastic work, they're exhausted. They have lost hundreds, sometimes thousands of pounds. The idea is this is an essential industry. Trouble is, the travelling public is sort of saying, no, you're not.
Pope Francis has asked for prayers for his predecessor, former Pope Benedict, saying he's very sick. The Vatican says Pope Benedict had a sudden worsening of his health in recent hours, but that his condition was under control and that he's receiving constant medical care. The 95-year-old former head of the Catholic Church became the first pope in 600 years to resign when he stepped down in 2013. Pope Francis, seen here on the left, made the surprise announcement at the end of his general audience.
I would like to ask all of you for a special prayer for Pope Emeritus Benedict, who, in silence, is sustaining the Church. Let us remember him. He is very sick, asking the Lord to console and sustain him in this witness of love for the Church until the end.
Religious journalist Luke Seneville said the Vatican was now in uncharted territory.
If the Pope Benedict dies, it will be the very first time that a Pope dies, an emerite Pope, Pope Emerite dies in the Vatican. So it will be all new. We don't know exactly, even if the Vatican has prepared things, we don't know exactly what will be organised and how it will be organised.
The government says it's urgently seeking information following reports that a number of UK-Iranian dual nationals have been detained in Iran. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard says it has arrested 7 individuals with direct links to the UK due to their alleged involvement in anti-government protests. A Number 10 spokesperson has rejected claims the UK is inciting riots within the country and called on Iran to stop holding foreign nationals for diplomatic leverage. The northeast of England could be the latest region to have a directly elected mayor as the government announces a £1.4 billion devolution deal. The arrangement would give powers over education, transport and housing to people across Northumberland, Newcastle and Sunderland. Elections for the new mayor would take place in May 2024 after a consultation process. In the US, the death toll in and around the city of Buffalo has risen to 32 as the country is battling a deadly winter storm. Authorities in the New York state have been digging out from under 4 feet of snow after a record amount of snowfall there. At least 60 people have died as the monster storm has battered North America over the last week. Meanwhile, here in the UK, provisional figures from the Met Office show this year has been the warmest on record. 2022 will have seen the highest annual average temperature, beating the record set in 2014. The Met Office noted whilst July saw particularly high levels of more than 40 degrees, all other months apart from December have also been warmer than average. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Mark.
Tamsin, thanks very much. Yes, more on that breaking news that we're getting from the Met Office about 2022 being the warmest on record. All the details that we're getting through from the Met Office at the moment. All 4 seasons in this year in the top 10 warmest on record for the UK. Winter, currently 8th warmest, spring the 5th, summer the 4th, autumn the 3rd. But Dr Mark McCarthy at the Met Office saying that the combined effect basically has meant that the record-breaking temperature in July particularly, of course, 40.3 Celsius I think we hit, has meant that overall the average has been the highest. And as we saw, he said, despite the couple of weeks in December when we had that big freeze, we've kept high temperatures throughout the year. And the record's going back, I think, to 1884. So an indication, of course, whether you believe climate change is man-made or not, it's definitely on the up. The latest we're getting told then is that we've got a yellow weather warning coming in, just to remind us of where we are in the winter. For Scotland, with wet weather coming in, the Met Office saying heavy rain also hitting England and Wales from early Friday morning 3 a.m. for much of Scotland to Edinburgh, Glasgow and Stirling. So we're not quite there yet. Now, industrial action by Border Force staff resuming today, hoping to make the government sit up and listen to their demands for better pay and conditions, with around 1,000 members of the PCS walking out until New Year's Eve, and then the union warning that those strikes could continue for months if the government doesn't actually start pay talks. Let's get the latest with our national reporter, Theo Chikomba, who's down at Gatwick for us. And Theo, the indications we've been getting from you is that actually things perhaps smoother than normal, given this is one of the busiest travel weekends of the year coming up.
That's right, yes, that's what Gatwick Airport spokespeople have told us, that things are running smoothly here today. It's a first day, of course, of a number of days they're going to be on the picket line this week. But in the last hour, we did hear from number 10 Downing Street, which might come to some disappointment for many people, that the government doesn't want to see pay increases of double digits. So They are asking for 10%, but what they've been offered is 2% at the moment. We've heard military personnel and sailors, as well as civil servants, joining many people inside the airport to make sure that passengers can get in and out. The only delays we have heard potentially, which may happen, are for people who are coming into the country, that things might be slower for them. But for those normally expecting to see passport officers, they are not around today as they are staging another day of strikes.
Yeah, and perhaps the weather hitting flights as well, as we can see from the conditions down there. But interesting, as you were pointing out, the Prime Minister's spokesman indicating perhaps that there's a bit of a softening, particularly on the rail issue, the rail strikes, where they want to have talks, because, of course, we had the border staff warning that there could be months of disruption to come unless the government does actually sit down and start negotiating.
Exactly. They say they have a mandate to continue doing this for at least 6 months. So there could be more scenes like we are seeing today over the next couple of months if a deal isn't reached. Whether or not it will be reached, we've heard over the weeks that they're saying companies should sit down with union bosses to make a deal. But again, we find ourselves here. We don't know at the moment when there is going to be a deal, but the government are encouraging the companies to sit down with them and get a better deal for staff. But it's a long road. It's a long road ahead, yes.
Yeah, and a long runway as well. We can still hear the aircraft coming in and out. As you said, 10 out of 10 for the sound effects. Thanks very much indeed for updating us down there at Gatwick, Theo. Well, let's just get the thoughts once more. Belinda, who's still with us, political commentator, former MEP. Are you planning to travel out anywhere this New Year, or...?
No, we're definitely homeward bound for New Year's Eve on the sofa watching films, having a very quiet one this year. I think the weather's supposed to be absolutely horrendous as well.
Well, as we've just been
exactly.
But it does seem every year, not just the industrial action, because we normally, of course, we get the maintenance on the railways, and as you say, we get bad weather for the flights. One wonders, you know, is it actually worth trying to get away at Christmas in the New Year anymore?
At all, exactly. But also there are strikes across Europe, so it's not just England that is going through railway strikes. For example, France has been through a lot the last week as well.
Yeah,
so
you quite enjoy striking.
They love striking, whereas, you know, comparably, the UK actually doesn't strike half as much as its European friends. France, Spain strike, Cyprus, these countries strike far more than we ever do. But these are unprecedented levels for the UK, and it just means that either side of the channel you're facing strikes.
Yeah, it does seem to indicate, though, growing frustration across the public sector. Yeah. Now, what do you make about the position that Rishi Sunak has reverted to time and time again, i.e. no double-digit, particularly that's the latest from Downing Street, because of what it can do to inflation? Because there are some economists saying, actually, it's not public service pay that would push up inflation, it's the private sector.
Well, I think Rishi's right, though, not to accept double-digit, because then you'd have to do it for everyone. And it's not the government's money, it's our money. It's how much we take home every month from our salary that's getting divvied out to all the public sector salaries. And, you know, I just wish there was a bit more Reagan about Rishi when he sacked 11,000 air traffic controllers in 1981. But what happened is that he got in the military, retrained people quickly, and actually people were not put out of convenience very much. And he gave them 48 hours to come back. And it did kind of set a climate of strike if you must, but when you're told it's illegal, if there's a national crisis or emergency, you cannot do it. And I think
the problem would be that if you adopt that approach and you take it across into the NHS and you start dismissing doctors and nurses,
yes,
and
that we can't touch.
Drivers,
not a chance.
But this is the whole issue, isn't it? That the relationship seems to have broken down between all the unions and the government on this.
Well, I think people feel very, very differently about our emergency workers. We see them as heroes. They often do hours out of goodwill and extra time, whereas we don't necessarily see passport controllers as heroes or doing any more work than the average, you know, person who works in Sainsbury's or something, and they're not, going on strike.
Indeed. Well, as you say, you're staying at home, which may be sage advice, but there are plenty of people trying to get away, and we just reflect that thousands, of course, having their travel plans disrupted by the problems, not just for the Border Force staff, but the rail workers as well, while costs carry on rising. Plans for the holidays even though the pandemic has subsided, being hit. So what can we expect until the new year if you've been stranded or out of pocket due to cancellations or problems? Let's get the views now of travel editor for the newspaper, Sophie Lamb, joining us. Sophie, thanks very much indeed. I guess one of the things would be look at your travel insurance policy, but we're always told that, book with a credit card because you can get them to step in and help.
Yeah, I mean, the first port of call with any cancellation is to go direct to your travel provider. So if it's an airline, they should refund you for a cancelled flight within 7 days. Compensation is a trickier issue. If it's due to weather, then it's usually not due because that's an extraordinary circumstance. Similarly, certain strikes as well, so border force strikes, if they were to sort of, if the operations were to unravel at the airports, then any kind of delays, it's, that those strikes are out of the hands of airlines, so the airlines wouldn't be forced to pay compensation to passengers.
Right. Yeah,
it's kind of a long chain of kind of resources to go to, depending on what the delay and disruption is due to.
Yeah, because obviously you've got to look at the various clauses in your travel insurance. But that's interesting about the airways or the airlines, because a lot of people, of course, over the various cancellations with COVID, criticised the airlines, even the big carriers, saying, for instance, they just couldn't even get through to the helplines to find out, what was happening about getting flights reorganised or getting money back.
Yeah, quite. I mean, that has set in chain a sort of a much more robust system for passengers to get in touch with airlines. But we're still seeing the same problems at the moment. Over in the US, where the storms have been battering the country, I think tens of thousands of passengers have been disrupted by delays and cancellations over there and not been able to get through to their airlines, particularly Southwest Airlines. It's been pretty drastic over there as well.
And is that affecting the transatlantic as well? Because I guess a lot of these airlines use planes that, go around the system. And even though they may be over in the States, they've got to get clearance to get their flight routes sorted out.
So far, we haven't seen too much disruption. I think there was just one cancellation to between Heathrow and New York today. It's been really bad over in the States, but it's been mostly domestic flights that have been affected over there. And so far, as you were reporting earlier, there hasn't been too much disruption due to the border force strikes at UK airports. I mean, I think what we are kind of braced for is just kind of e-gate failures. If those start to go wrong, then things could unravel pretty quickly. But so far, it's been pretty smooth with military personnel standing in for force staff.
And is that because we've all got these new passports, or because the technology itself is actually being put into action? Because I know a lot of people criticised it in the past, where they arrived at the airport and only sort of 3 or 4 e-gates would be open.
Yeah, quite. I mean, we've seen that plenty of times in the past. At the moment, they're functioning really well, and airports, I imagine, have been testing them pretty robustly in the run up to these strikes. But we know that tech can fail quickly, and things can unravel very quickly too.
Yeah, and we have to ask the travel editor at the Eye: are you staying at home or trying to get away anywhere?
I'm not going abroad, no. I've had plenty of delays this year. And I have to say, I did the October half-term getaway and it was really smooth. So I think we can be fairly proud of the kind of the travel sector this winter, because after the horrible scenes of the summer, it has been functioning pretty smoothly in terms of routes and airports.
OK, so we'll put our hands together for the travel industry coming back and helping us all. Maybe we'll assess that after the new year, see where we are. Sophie, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thanks very much. Now, reports suggesting that the overhaul of the government's counter-terrorism or extremism programme has been delayed by a row within the Cabinet. Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, preparing to publish an independent review of the Prevent programme and accepting recommendations. But then Michael Gove, responsible for implementing Prevent on the ground in his role as the Community Secretary, objecting to the way the review is actually presented, wants it all published in full. The Home Office redacting several individual and groups named in the report, apparently due to fears it could expose the department to being sued for libel. Well, joining us now is former Senior Military Intelligence Officer Philip Ingram, MBE. Philip, thank you for your time. This is a bit of a row at the very top of government by two pretty spirited individuals.
Well, it is. I've read the report, and it says they were rowing, and then it goes on at the end of the report to say that they actually haven't talked about it, and they're not rowing. So there's clearly some discussions going on, and the whole of the government's contest strategy is being reviewed at the moment, and it's right and appropriate that Prevent as part of that, which is a fantastically successful programme that is running well today. It gets looked at robustly as part of that programme.
Because I was going to ask you, how Prevent had been assessed, because clearly when we get any kind of terrorist outrage, one of the first things that's criticised is the government failing to keep its eye on the ball, as they say.
Yeah, well, this is Prevent is all about providing a duty of care and stopping people getting falling into terrorism in different areas. So it allows the police are the major ones who refer individuals to it, so that individuals don't go down the criminal justice system. They get into a system that assesses them and sees if they need to be de-radicalized in any way, shape or form. And the other sector that refers the majority of people is the education sector. And last year there was 4,915 individuals referred to it. There's an increasing number from extreme right-wing terror backgrounds, but then terrorism morphs over the years.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, where are we, not just with the level of terror threat, but the nature of it? Because clearly they are indicating the amount of intelligence chatter with various groups has lessened, but there's still that threat from what they call the lone wolf, individuals who've been radicalised.
There is, and it's changing. As a country, we're unsubstantial at the moment, which means a terrorist attack is likely. It's the mid-level of threat that's there. But during the lockdown period, the different groups, both extreme right-wing and Islamist, have been radicalising or trying to radicalise individuals online and groups of people online to try and get them to go out and carry out attacks. And the counter-terrorism police have been very successful in interdicting a number of attacks since the London Bridge attacks in 2017. So there's a lot going on in the background. Prevent is part of that. And then there's a new element to the contest strategy, the protect duty that's coming in, that is also going to be known as Martin's Law. That's come out of the lessons from the Manchester Arena attack.
Yeah. And of course, all the families still suffering as a result of that. The other issue, we had the warnings on cyber terrorism, and that we were likely to see an increase as a result of Russia and Ukraine. That doesn't seem to have come through as far as we know. I mean, clearly, obviously, GCHQ may have been working hard behind the scenes on that.
There's a lot of cyber activities been going on around the Ukraine-Russian war, mainly aimed by Russia at the Ukrainians. But the Ukrainians have been prepared for this since 2014, so have got probably the best defense system in the world. And the Russians are slightly apprehensive at trying to expand it outside the borders. They've done it in a few places, but the Secretary General of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, turned around very early in the conflict and said that a cyber attack under certain circumstances could constitute an Article 5 attack, and the Russians are petrified about anything that would trigger Article 5 because they know
that would encounter NATO responding as a body together.
Correct. Yes, and NATO again has been advising. NATO and other countries have been advising the Ukrainians, and are well aware of Russia's capabilities and are focused on keeping us defended. In the UK, it's the National Cybersecurity Centre that looks after not just government but helps provide security for businesses as well.
So safe at the moment, but as ever, stay alert. Philip, thank you very much for joining us. Yeah, we wish you a safe and happy New Year. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, and you too.
Philip Ingram joining us there with his assessment of the security situation. We'll update you, of course, on what the government decides between Michael Gove and Suella Braverman. Coming up, Birmingham having the honour of hosting that Commonwealth Games event this year. Jack Carson looking at how the conversation is turning into legacy and what they can build for all the youngsters in the city. Let's get an update now on the weather. Yellow warning in place for us.
Hello there, welcome to your weather update. I'm Claire Nazir. Here are your headlines. Windy today with coastal gales as rain pushes northwards. The risk of hill snow later across Scotland and some showers to follow. Your bigger picture, low pressure firmly in charge. Now the ice warning across Scotland eases through the morning, but this rain warning across southern parts of Wales as well as the West Country extends through the afternoon. It's wet outside through this lunchtime. You can see the rain slowly moving towards the central belt of Scotland, where it will be heavy. Rain also for Northern Ireland, covering much of the Midlands, Northern England. Drier further north, with some cloud further south and southwest. We'll see some brighter skies emerge, but also some showers, and those winds will be relentless, but delivering some milder conditions to the south of that weather front. Now overnight, the rain continues its passage northwards, returning towards the west as we head through the evening and overnight, and more showers gather across northern England, Wales and the West Country. Some clearer skies further east, but still a few showers here. Now it's going to be a windy night, keeping temperatures up away from the far north, where it will be a chilly start to the day on Thursday, even with a little sunshine, but rain never too far away. Now through Thursday, we watch as showers continue to track in on that strong wind across England and Wales. We'll see some wet weather for Northern Ireland around lunchtime, as well as Western Scotland, and that again will ease as it eases towards the east. So some wet weather across many areas, but sunshine and showers for England and Wales. Some of these showers will be on the heavy side, and temperatures are notched down on today. Now through the evening and overnight, we watch as another batch of rain arrives across Ireland. Some clearer skies ahead of it. Temperatures will take a tumble, but it does mean a bright start to the day come Friday morning across these parts. Generally speaking, as we head through the next few days, the last few days of 2022, it remains unsettled, but some dry weather through New Year's Eve and into New Year's Day across some parts.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
So we've got the year drawing to a close and Birmingham reflecting on its time hosting the Commonwealth Games. The city now drawing up plans to turn those areas into a sports hub. So the conversation turning into how they can build a legacy in the coming year and to help young people who are, of course, still suffering, many in the community. Our West Midlands reporter Jack Carson has the details for us.
2022 has been a huge year for Birmingham. As host to one of the biggest sporting events in the world, billions of people tuned into the Commonwealth Games taking place here in the West Midlands. This month, the official thank you event has been held to mark the end of the year of the Games and reflect on what Council leader Ian Ward believes was a hugely successful summer.
5 million people came into the city during the Commonwealth Games. 5 times the population of the city came to our city to be part of that global event. It was a huge, huge success. I've never seen an atmosphere in the city of Birmingham like the one we had during the Games this summer. And the Commonwealth Games federations were kind enough to say to us that it wasn't just a Commonwealth Games, it was the best ever Commonwealth Games.
Also at the ceremony was the handing over of the Queen's baton, which will be displayed in the city. Now this part of the West Midlands turns its attention to how to build a Games legacy. For Birmingham City Council, that starts in the community.
Well, we're investing now in grassroots community sport, grassroots community culture as a legacy from the Games. We're also creating a cultural festival that will be an annual event here in the city centre, but we'll look to connect out all of our communities into that festival in the same way as we did with the Commonwealth Games.
Along with investment from the council, Sport England are providing £35 million worth of combined National Lottery and government funding to ensure the effect of Birmingham 2022 is felt for people across the city and the country as well. Chief Executive Tim Hollingsworth says it's about giving young people access to sport.
Well, I think the most important thing for sport now, particularly coming out of the Birmingham Games, is to understand that we do not have equal access and opportunity to playing sport and being physically active. There are significant barriers to entry and some very stubborn inequalities, actually. The ambition is to enable people locally, regionally and indeed ultimately nationally to have more activity in their lives, to feel the benefit of that for their physical, mental health and well-being, their sense of community, and perhaps most of all to have ensured that those who previously felt more excluded, less engaged by sport, have had the chance because of the programmes that we've run.
One community project receiving funding is the Impact Fitness Academy, a group in Birmingham trying to make a difference to people's lives through combat sports such as freestyle wrestling and boxing. Assistant coach Hanaya Kusar stresses the importance of that money for projects like this.
It's helped us build our business and start to get more equipment and allow us to increase our class numbers so that we can reach wider community areas.
The next Commonwealth Games are to be held in Victoria, Australia in 2026, and there'll be expectations for them to put on a show like Birmingham did. In the meantime, this city is starting to build its legacy and keep that Games spirit alive. Jack Carson, GB News.
Oh, bigging it up for Birmingham. You've been bigging up your own views with plenty of you getting in touch at gbviews@gbnews.uk. First on this BMA warning that doctors will be leaving for Shaw's New. Sue says no doctor should be allowed to emigrate unless or until they've paid back the loans they've had to train in the UK. I don't see why the British taxpayer should bear the cost of their training for them to go to another country to earn more. Although I think perhaps many of those doctors say they've actually paid for a lot of their training themselves. On having more mayors at the North East, particularly with levelling up there, Bernard says the mayoral way is not the way to go. One person should not have the power to decide what an area wants. Look at London, a total disaster. Manchester, another area where it's not working. Andy Burnham may actually disagree with you a bit on that. However, keep those views going and we'll reflect them throughout the rest of the day. Also coming up, house prices. Well, they're falling as we approach the new year, but how far will the drop be for 2023? Discussing that with property expert Martin Roberts. First, the latest headlines with Tamsin.
Mark, thank you. It's 2:33. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. 2 men have been arrested on suspicion of murder in connection with the stabbing of a 23-year-old man in a Birmingham nightclub. Semi-professional footballer Cody Fisher was stabbed to death on the dance floor of the Crane nightclub on Boxing Day. Hundreds of people were in the club at the time. West Midlands police say a 22-year-old was arrested in Birmingham city centre last night and a 21-year-old man was also arrested in London. Border Force staff and driving examiners are the latest to stage industrial action, with travel disruption also on the rail network. Members of the PCS union representing Border Force staff at multiple UK airports are striking over pay, jobs and conditions. Driving examiners have begun a 5-day walkout affecting more than 70 testing centres in the east of England and the Midlands. Meanwhile, on the rail network, TSSA union members are striking, causing disruption on the Great Western Railway and West Midlands trains. Pope Francis has asked for prayers for his predecessor, former Pope Benedict, saying he's very sick. The 95-year-old former head of the Catholic Church became the first pope in 600 years to resign when he stepped down in 2013. Pope Francis, seen on the left here, made the surprise announcement at the end of his general audience, but didn't give any further details. Provisional figures from the Met Office show this year has been the warmest on record. 2022 will have seen the highest annual average temperature, beating the record set in 2014. The Met Office noted that whilst July saw particularly high levels, including a peak of more than 40 degrees Celsius, all other months, apart from December, have also been warmer than average. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
And welcome back to GB News Live. Now, I don't need to tell you that it's been turbulent times for the housing markets. Prices since COVID rising 20%, but now the latest predictions from the Office of Budget Responsibility forecasting a 9% drop by autumn of next year. Landlords selling up en masse as they face higher mortgage rates, reduced tax relief and other costs, disrupting, of course, that buy-to-let business model. Well, let's get the views now of what the housing market may be bringing us in the new year. TV property expert Martin Roberts. Martin, thank you very much indeed for joining us. You're a dab hand at spotting the bargains, of course, with Homes Under the Hammer. But are the bargains all disappearing now, given what's happening with the housing market?
Sorry, I'm just polishing my crystal ball here to see if I can help. It's, I think the eyes are all on it, aren't they? The eyes are definitely all on the housing market at the moment, and everybody is worried about what will happen. And it does make good news, or rather news, to talk about it. And so many people jumping on the bandwagon of saying it's all doom and gloom, la-di-da-di-da. And I would take you back to the start of lockdown when exactly the same doom-mongers were out there saying how terrible it was all going to be. Really, really influential people predicting 25 to 40% drops in house prices at the start of lockdown. And we saw absolutely the opposite. We saw 25% increases, stuff that nobody could have predicted. And the housing market is resilient. It does go through ups and downs. It is a long-term or medium to long-term strategic investment. And it will have cyclical moves. You know, at times it does drop down, at times it goes up. And that's just the way it is. But if you look back over history, it's always carried on in the same direction. So what I would say to people is at this point, just don't panic and don't believe what you read. And if you're not in the market for selling or buying, don't worry about it. Just don't even, it's a dinner party conversation. It's a feel-good factor to know your house is going up in value. But if you're not in the process of moving, just don't worry about it. And if you are in the process of trying to buy, you could see any potential drops as a bit of a bonus, because instead of going out of reach, house prices are maybe coming down to something which you might be able to negotiate a deal on. And I'd say to anybody in that situation, use all the negativity to your advantage. So if I'm negotiating at this point, I'm pointing out all the doom mongers and I'm finding the worst case scenarios to present the person I'm potentially buying from to negotiate myself a better deal. So, you know, first time buyers, people who aren't in the housing market yet, yes, they've got to do a few more things to get there. But I would not, again, say that things are doom and gloomy for them. Bear in mind that when the mortgage market review came in, following the 2007-2008 sort of problems, they factored in increases in interest rates, and they made affordability to a point of the levels beyond where they are right now. So we've all got used to low interest rates. We've all got used to silly, unbelievable interest rates. But historically, even if you get a mortgage at 4%, 5%, 6%, it's still cheap in the whole history of lending of money.
Yeah, however, of course, obviously people are having to actually borrow a lot more of the value of the house in terms of looking at their wages, you know, 5-6 times their earning capacity, of course, and therefore, if house prices do drop, they've got this awful thing of negative equity hanging over their heads. However, given the fact that we're being told interest rates may start to peak into spring and summer next year, a lot of people are wondering, when do I jump if I'm a first-time buyer particularly, and what's happening with the mortgage market? Because, of course, a lot of those fixed deals coming to an end for people.
So it did go through this chaotic 4 weeks, didn't it? Yeah. Which nobody could have predicted. And everything went into an unprecedented turmoil, certainly with mortgage brokers. If you talk to them now, things have settled down, OK, and rates are starting to drop. If you're looking to buy those crazy rates that were a bit of a knee-jerk reaction that came in, they have been replaced by lower rates. So at least that's a move in the right direction. And what the markets don't like is instability. And what we've got at least now is a bit of stability. Well, not in the world, but you know, in our immediate financial environment. Yeah. Obviously, the cost of living crisis is a worry, and as are, you know, just the general feeling of uncertainty. But I just counsel people to just don't panic. You know, it is cyclical, and I'm not a doom monger. There aren't enough houses in this country. There's a huge demand, and if you're looking to rent, or you know, if you're thinking about the idea of renting, just remember that often, even at a slightly higher interest rate, owning your own place and paying a mortgage is going to be cheaper than renting. And I think a lot of landlords are going to be under a lot of pressure to pass on some of their own increased costs, understandably, to the people who are renting from them. So I fear that focus should be more on what's going to happen in the rental market. And you can slightly insulate yourself from that by trying to get into the housing market and use maybe the negativity to negotiate yourself a better deal.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that sort of other point of the property market, and that is people who've been trying to use it instead of a pension, for instance, and they bought second homes or they've got properties that are renting out at flats. Where's that going to come in the year ahead? I mean, can people get their fingers burnt if they're not too careful?
Well, I mean, I am obviously a huge believer in housing as a good thing to money in, and if you get the numbers right, but not every house will work, not every property is a good thing to buy, but if you do your due diligence, you work out what is required in an area and you're buying property at the right price that is going to deliver you a return on your investment, then you can just look at the numbers, and it is a numbers game. You've got to view property, if you're going to go into that, as a business. So you look, how much is this property going to cost me to buy? How much can it potentially generate me? How much is it going to cost me to get into a state where I can rent it out or whatever I'm going to do with it? And if the numbers stack up, if you've got a property that you bought for 100,000 and it's delivering you an 8% yield or a 6% yield, it will still deliver you that money whether the price goes up or down. So I think that there's still huge merits in that. And in terms of the people I know who've put their money into property in terms of a pension planning strategy, along with a balanced portfolio, and you should never have all your eggs in one basket in any financial circumstances, I think they are seeing that the property, especially in recent times, has given them actually a lifeboat. And it's provided them with financial security. And certainly if you haven't made pension provisions and you're at later stages in life, property can probably be the only thing that's going to give you a potential income in the future. Because if you start looking at putting money into a personal pension and stuff like that, you're never going to accrue what you need in a relatively short amount of time, whereas property could deliver you something which might help you in future life. Guidance, not financial advice, of course, which is FCA control, but wise all the same. And we have to ask you before you go, Martin, I know you had a bit of a health scare in the past year or so. You look pretty hale and hearty at the moment, which was good news. Yeah, not 100% there, and it's taken a bit of a toll here and there, but I'm here, I'm still fighting, and I'm happy to have another Christmas, another year to look forward to. Yeah, great. Well, we wish you a happy new year. Thanks very much for joining us here in GB News. Great to talk to you. Thank you very much. Well, let's just reflect that we've still got Belinda here, who's been with us throughout the programme. Poor thing. But yeah, talking on all sorts of issues, which has been great. And you're saying you've got young children who obviously will be looking at some stage to leaving home. And it's a frightening thing for young people looking at the property market, isn't it?
Frightening. I feel like I'm going to be the sort of Elizabeth Bennet trying to marry my four daughters off earlier than expected. Mum and dad. Well, I think it's the only way young people are going to be able to afford a house of their own is to buy with someone else. But I also see the shift in people working from home as well. So the pressure to move to London and pay high rents and try and face the London house. It's like, I mean, you could live in Scarborough or Margate, two beautiful coastal areas of this country, absolutely stunning, much cheaper property, and work from home far more now than you could, before the pandemic. So that's slightly encouraging. But
as Martin was indicating, that the rental market has just gone completely bananas, isn't it? It's crazy. And I know landlords, obviously, a lot of them are trying to make a living by renting out homes. But as Martin was indicating, it's now perhaps even cheaper to get a mortgage than it is to pay the rent.
He made a very good point, because I have friends at the moment who've just rented in London, and when times are good, that's great. But when times are bad, you have nothing to sell. So if your mortgage is going to be the same as rent would be, then it may be worth buying instead, if you can. But that's another good thing about mayors, by the way, because the new North East mayor will have the powers to build new homes on brownfields. But there's another question as to what sort of homes and where do they go. True, but at least it's more homes. Yeah. But we shall look forward to all the financial projections for the year ahead, particularly, of course, if you're thinking of jumping in to that property market. Belinda, thank you for that. But let's just update you now on things in this past year that really shook the nation. Yes,
despite Her Majesty the Queen's advanced years. Her passing on 8th of September this year, a shock with a huge sense of loss across the country. Our royal reporter Cameron Walker looks back now on that day and the momentous events that followed.
The news that everyone was dreading happened. Buckingham Palace has announced that the Queen has died peacefully at Balmoral.
A day that is now etched in history.
Queen Elizabeth II was the rock on which modern Britain was built. Our country has grown and flourished under her reign. Britain is the great country it is today because of her.
Thousands gathered at royal residences to lay flowers and Paddington bears. A nod to Her late Majesty's surprise sketch at her Platinum Jubilee. Immediately, Charles ascended the throne and was formally proclaimed king at the Accession Council in St James's Palace. Politicians, past and present, united in grief despite their party differences.
He'd lost his mother on the Thursday. Here he was on the Saturday morning, standing in front of all of his Privy Councillors. They're his Privy Councillors now.
The King paid tributes to his beloved mother and renewed her pledge of lifelong service.
Hi everyone, thank you so much.
An olive branch from Prince William to his brother Prince Harry, when the siblings reunited to greet the public with their wives and view flowers outside Windsor. Any reconciling was short-lived. The Queen's coffin, accompanied by her daughter Princess Anne, was driven to St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh to lie at rest. An opportunity for the people of Scotland to pay their last respects to the Queen of the United Kingdom. An RAF C-17 flew Her late Majesty back to London. The state hearse, specially designed for the public to see inside, drove down crowd-lined streets before one final night in Buckingham Palace. A well-rehearsed ceremonial procession brought the Queen to Westminster Hall so the public could pay their last respects as Her late Majesty lay in state.
People would queue for hours on end. They'd finally get in, and it would be 5 seconds, 6 seconds, and it just happened so beautifully and so peacefully.
The state gun carriage of the Royal Navy, pulled by 142 Royal Naval ratings, took Queen Elizabeth II's coffin to Westminster Abbey for the state funeral. At the King's request, the wreath on top of the coffin contained flowers from the gardens of Buckingham Palace, Clarence House and Highgrove. The royal family's dignity and stoicism shone through in the face of unimaginable grief. Princess Charlotte's choice of brooch, in the shape of a horseshoe, was gifted by her great-grandmother, the Queen. She, alongside her future king brother George, processed behind the coffin with their parents, the Prince and Princess of Wales. A state hearse to Windsor Castle for the committal service. More than 800 people, including the Queen's personal staff, filled St George's Chapel, in stark contrast to Prince Philip's funeral, where just 30 people could attend because of COVID restrictions. The imperial state crown, the orb and the sceptre were removed from the coffin and placed on the high altar. The King then placed the Queen's camp colour of the Grenadier Guards on the coffin. The wand broken, creating the symmetry with the 3 instruments of state being removed, ready to be passed on to their successor. The Queen was buried with her late husband, Prince Philip, in a private service in the King George VI Memorial Chapel. Back together for eternity. Cameron Walker, GB News.
Well, Cameron's joining us now in the studio. And we use this phrase, moment of reflection, but it really is seeing those photos and moving footage once more, because it seems to a degree so long ago, you know, and so much has happened, and yet the images, we're still trying to come to the terms, the fact the Queen has gone.
Yeah, it's hard to believe it's literally only 3 months ago that happened. And I think one of the reasons for that is because she was Queen that reigned over a vast majority of all of our lives. Many of us had never known another monarch. Up until we got King Charles III, and now, of course, we're looking very much ahead to his coronation, which is in May next year, and looking forward to that. So, yes, it's very sad the Queen has died, but then we had the first of many things, haven't we, recently? So we had the first King's Christmas message broadcast on the 25th of December.
Which had a bigger audience than the Queen's broadcast last year.
Yes.
We had 10.7 as opposed to Her Majesty's, I think it was 8.9. So, you know, by some degree.
I think people were very curious as to what King Charles would say in his speech. Of course, it's the first of many, one would imagine, but it just shows the popularity, I think, of the monarchy.
Belinda, you were telling us that you were there, camped out on the Mall to see it, and you were there going to see the Queen's coffin as well, lying in state there. What did you make of the King's broadcast and the message that he had?
I thought he did a really good job. I mean, he kind of had unfillable shoes. Like, he could never compete with the Queen, and I think he knew that. So he made it relatively short, but very unwoke. I think there were some concerns it would be he'd get the environment in there and do that. But no, it was a really beautiful Christian-based speech with a huge sort of love call out to all other faiths.
Yeah, so defender of faith rather than of the faith.
But holding on to his Christian beliefs. And also he stood up and delivered it, which, of course, we've seen for many years the Queen sit down and deliver it that way. So it was quite nice and refreshing. I think he did a really good job, Charles. I was really impressed.
Yeah, and do you think we will see a different style of monarchy now? Will it be very much his stamp?
I think he'll definitely put a modern twist on things, but as Belinda was saying, it's very much traditional values of Christianity and all of that with the speech, and we'll see that going forward as we get close to Coronation.
I'm glad he didn't mention Harry and Meghan. I thought that was very wise.
Yes.
Never
very wise, because that would have detracted from the rest of his speech.
Anyway, we shall finish with God Save the King.
Perfect. God save the King.
Thank you very much indeed. Lovely to have you in the studio. That's it from us, but Patrick's up next. But before that, let's update on the latest weather. Yellow warning in place.
Hello there, welcome to your weather update. I'm Claire Nazir. Here are your headlines. Windy today with coastal gales as rain pushes northwards, the risk of hill snow later across Scotland and some showers to follow. Your bigger picture, low pressure firmly in charge. Now the ice warning across Scotland eases through the morning, but this rain...
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories.